So I think we can start now. Good morning. Welcome to the Board of Agriculture. Thank you for joining us this morning for the Oregon Board of Agriculture meeting. Today is Wednesday, November 16, 2022. This is Luisa Santamaria, Chair of the Board. This meeting is now called to order. So now, I would like to begin by asking the Department of Agriculture Board Coordinator Carla Balnes to review a few housekeeping items for the meeting.
Good morning, this is Carla. Just a reminder, if you are on the phone or joining us online this morning, if you would mute your phones so we can eliminate some of the background noise. If you are joining us by conference call only, pre-meeting materials are posted on the ODA website at https://oda.direct/board agriculture. I'll also note this morning that we are having the link on the printed agenda that's posted on the webpage is not working, but I have updated the board page with the link. So you should be able to get in that way if you're joining us just by conference call this morning.
Okay, just to remember, this meeting is being recorded. Thank you, Carla. Now, Carla, will you please call the roll of introductions? But I will begin with I'm Luisa Santamaria. I'm a public member. I'm also extension plant pathologist working at OSU.
Chad Allen. Just introduce yourself.
Chad Allen.
Barbara Boyer.
What do you do?
From Tillamook, Dairyman.
Barbara Boyer.
Good morning, Barbara Boyer. I have the pleasure of sitting here today as the chair of the Soil and Water Conservation Commission.
Brian Harper.
Good morning, Brian Harper, farmer, Junction City.
Shante Johnson, I believe, was going to join us remotely. Miguel Lopez.
Miguel Lopez, public member, vineyard manager in the Willamette Valley.
Elin Miller.
Elin Miller, wine grape grower and hazelnut grower in Umpqua, Oregon.
Eric Orem.
Eric Orem, farmer, wheat cattle, Heppner, Oregon.
Randy Svati.
Randy Savati, Ontario, farmer.
Josh Zielinski.
Josh Zielinski, farmer, Salem, Oregon.
Dean Simonich.
Stacy Simonich, Dean of the College of Agricultural Sciences at Oregon State University and Director of the Oregon Agricultural Experiment Station.
Acting Director Henderson.
Good morning. Acting Director Lauren Henderson, Department of Agriculture.
If you're joining us in person this morning, I'd like to encourage you to use the sign-in sheet in the back of the room so we have a record. If folks are joining us online, if you would add your name to the chat box, that would be great. Do we have anyone on the phone only this morning? If so, would you unmute and introduce yourself?
Good morning. This is Andrea Cantu-Shomis with the Oregon Department of Agriculture, on my way, but joining by phone right now.
Thank you. And then we'll start around the room. Jonathan.
Jonathan Stand-Up, Assistant Director at Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Isaac Stevens, Natural Resources Program Area Director.
Margina Allen, Water Quality Program Manager. Chris Benjamin, Intern Director for Conservation Program Area.
From HIPS, ODA, Water Quality Monitoring Specialist.
I'm Sherry Knoxall, I'm the Director of the Oregon Agricultural Education Foundation.
Okay. Thank you, Carla. So in this, we're going to start our meeting, and I want to let you know that we have a public comment in the schedule for today at 11 a.m. We have received 2 written public comments and have 2 requests to make a verbal comments at today's meeting. If you would like to sign up this morning to provide verbal comments in person, please use the sign-up sheet on the table prior to the comment period. If you are joining the meeting online, please make a request using the chat box, including your name and organization. Comment time will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Yeah, so the meeting is, as I start to be recorded, and I want to remind the members to state your name for the record before you begin any comment. Okay, let's start with our first point in our agenda, first item. I would like to move to as the acting director. No, sorry. Minutes, exactly. Thank you. Well, we will move to the review and approval of the minutes from the August meeting. And I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Madam Chair, Elin Miller for the record. I move to approve the minutes as presented.
Randy Savati, I second that.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any other discussion? No? Okay, so the motion passes, so we approve vote first. I'm gonna ask the members to vote, so say aye for or no who are, okay. So, yeah, all those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
So everybody say aye, we're good. The says have it and the motion passes, right? Correct? We're done with this. Oh, okay. All those opposed, say no. No, I said everybody say yes, so let's do it. Oh, now it passes, okay. Now, I was going in a hurry here. I'm gonna ask the acting director, Henderson, for a report.
Good morning. Lauren Henderson for the record, and I'll try to be very brief so we can stay on schedule. Hard to believe it's been 6 weeks now, I think, since I've been acting director with the department since 1999 in the state with 37 years. So it's not totally a new thing. I have talked to former Director Taylor. She's doing well, sitting and waiting for Congress to get her passed. So hopefully that'll happen this week or next week. So certainly miss her and wish her well and can't wait for her to get started in her new role. I think she has some big plans there, and I know there's a lot of expectations for her there, but I'm anxious to call her a friend and stay connected with her as she texts me once in a while, every once in a while. One of the things I wanted to mention is the transition. I think I'm super proud of my executive team. They have really stepped up. I don't think our agency's missed a beat between Alexis and myself and our team. We're doing what we do every day, and that's try to serve Oregon agriculture in the best way we can. And that's, I think, really important, not only for our new staff who are worried about the transition and what it might bring, but just generally the angst that is happening all over our state right now. There's lots of agriculture issues, and I'm hearing constantly, daily about this has been another bad year. Bad year in a lot of ways. I know on the east side of the state, I'm hearing production levels are way off, and that is concerning, certainly for us, and we'll see what that brings going forward. I wanted to say that one of the things that Alexis and I chatted about as she was leaving and I was becoming the acting director was to reemphasize in our agency our customer service to each other internally as well as externally. That our agency does really well at that, but I think there was some areas that we can improve on, and so we're really focused on that. You will hear the director's office talk a lot about that. And when I say internally to each other, I mean that because sometimes we get so busy and so lost in what we're doing individually that I think sometimes we have discussions internally that kind of miss each other. And so I'm really focused on that. You will hear me talk more about that. And really, it's not about being a yes agency or no agency. It's more about returning phone calls. It's the simple things. I think we've learned out of COVID that sometimes that's lost. I think the virtual thing is great, but I think we're going to ask our executive team to meet in person once in a while. So I have everybody there so we can actually get on a whiteboard the old fashioned way and draw some things out to really problem solve. And so we're working on that and we'll continue to do that. I know all three governors candidates expressed the desire for agencies to be customer service focused. I think that's one place they all agreed on. I agree with that. My team agrees with that. So we will be focused on that. I just wanted to mention recruitment challenges in our agency continue, just like everywhere. It seems like we get some really good candidates and we get them through to the final stages and then somebody snaps them up. And that's how quick they are moving. But we're not alone in that, and it's just a challenge. So you will continue to see some vacancies. We have some key vacancies in our agency and really need to get those filled sooner than later. But we're trying, and we'll keep moving on. The last thing I wanted to mention is the Governor Brown's trade mission to Korea, Japan. Jonathan and Jess and Teresa went on that trip and just got back, and then Jess turned right around to go to Vietnam with the governor and her team. I will just say it was a good reminder, I think, of why you need to be there in person and discuss things. I think that was missed sorely through the COVID pandemic, and I think it was Japan, Jonathan, that just relaxed some of their COVID things. So that was a good trip. We need to get back out more. I was hoping to go to East Africa, but got ill and didn't get to go, and I was hoping to give you a report on that. But we did have Gary Neuschwander go on that trip, and I'm anxious to hear about that trip. I think I would like at the next board meeting for us to do a small segment about both of those trips and what we learned and who we took, so the board can hear about that. We don't often talk about the results of those trips when we go, so I think that would be a beneficial. That concludes my report, Chair.
Okay, let's continue with the second item in our agenda. That is the ODA budget and legislative update. Okay, presenter Jonathan Santo.
Good morning, Chair Santamarina, Director Henderson, members of the board, Jonathan Sandow, Assistant Director at the Oregon Department of Agriculture. We'll be, again, moving through it pretty quick this morning. Not much has changed in terms of the budget conversation that we had in September or August, but some different dynamics are now known. And really, I want to focus on the back end of the presentation today on the reduction options that is part of our agency request budget. But first, I'll just start with kind of providing a quick update around the elections and what the timeline looks on that. And so, last week, election week, arguably one of the best weeks every 2 years. But for those who love it. And out of that, we have Governor-elect Tina Kotek will be Oregon's next governor. Inauguration is January 9th. And so that will be the inauguration date for both governor and new legislatures in the House and the Senate. And then in the legislature itself, there's still, as of this morning, last time I checked, there are still 4 House seats that have yet to be called in Oregon. Still pretty close margins, but neither party has a supermajority in either chamber at this point. And so both in the Senate and the House, the Democrats had supermajorities for the past 2-4 years, which essentially means that they could pass revenue raising bills along party line. They would have that threshold. Now that they don't have supermajorities, that's kind of the difference there. The overall theme, I think, especially out of this election, is it's going to be a very new green government going into next year. We have a new governor office, full new staff there. 60% of the House of Representatives ran their first election this cycle. So that means either they're brand new to the legislature or they were appointed within the last 2 years and ran their first election. And then we'll have newer leadership on both chambers. Speaker Rayfield. This will be the first long session, and then in the Senate with Senator President Peter Courtney retiring, they will elect a new Senate president in the Senate side, and so we'll have new leadership in both chambers going into into that long session. New governor's office. We will have a new director. There will be new agency directors and leaderships around the state. So it's going to be a fairly kind of newer, greener government at least into their roles, not necessarily, the folks that fit into those roles. They've been in government for a while, but that is one thing that we're, looking at going into next session is just the the dynamics around that, meaning there's going to be a lot more opportunity to educate, to reintroduce ourselves, to re-engage with folks, maybe for the first time or in a different capacity, which, you know, is both an exciting and an exhausting opportunity. But it'll be, I think it'll be for the good that we'll have those chances and be able to kind of reintroduce who we are with a full new team. The budget. So moving on to the kind of the budget conversation, September 1, we talked about our budget in the last board meeting. We went through the highlights. We're not going to do that again this time because we had submitted the whole budget package on September 1, which is the agency request budget. That goes then through the full process. We've had meetings with DAS, you know, through those conversations with the budget folks. And then on December 1, the current governor, Governor Kate Brown, will put out her budget, her last budget. And then the governor-elect, Governor Kotek, will have until February 1 to introduce kind of her budget to the legislature, which will be then the framework then that the Ways and Means Committees work from moving into session. And so that's kind of the timeline for our budget. It's a little bit different. You know, when you have a sitting governor's budget comes out December 1, that's known. We move into full session with that budget. This time we'll, you know, the governor's budget then that we will have in front of our committees will be February 1. So it's a bit different timeline for us, the legislature, the governor's office. And then part of that, there's quarterly revenue forecasts that come out that kind of give the projections of what the different revenue streams are around the state. The final quarter projections are happening today at 10 a.m. And so we won't know anything until they post, you know, kind of how their forecast is today at 10 a.m. But that will really feed into the February 1 budget, because then the next revenue forecast will be in mid-February. And so these budgets will be based off of kind of today's revenue forecast and projections. So that's kind of the timeline that we're working on. Really what we wanted to come here today and put in front of everyone, because it's, you know, it's part of the budget process, is the reduction option list that every agency puts forward as part of their ARB. Kind of by process and by decision makings, each agency has to put forward a 10% reduction list across all funding streams. So general fund, which is your taxpayer funded revenue streams, lottery funds, which are Measure 76 lottery funds, other funds, which are essentially any fees, licensings, those types of things, and then federal funds, any federal dollars that agencies receive. And so across those things, we have to reduce, we have to put reduction options of 10% across each funding category. It's not a fun exercise. It's not a, you know, pick your, you know, pick the the programs that you want to, you know, talk more about kind of a deal, but it's an exercise where we block it out 5%, and we'll put those reduction options in front of the legislature as essentially options on, you know, if we're in budget constraint times, where, you know, where those reductions can go, you know, starting point of conversations. And so the reduction list that you guys were provided, I'm not going to go point by point. We just wanted to put it in front of you because, you know, some of these may pop up in our budget, some of them may not pop up into the governor's budget. We wanted to make sure that folks had it. We had a chance to present it to you, but then also, I think most importantly, kind of talk about the little method of madness and methodology that went into forming the reduction list. And I'll say that there's, with Director Henderson's, you know, leadership, there's different approaches that can be taken here, and one is kind of that share the pain model, where you take a little bit from a lot of programs, which has its plus and minuses, right? You're not doing wholesale cuts, but you're also then just kind of thinning the soup throughout, and you're putting a bunch of stressors on a bunch of programs. Or you look at full programs and say, look, if we're going to take reductions, then, you know, we need to keep the rest of the core programs or other programs fully intact, then these are kind of the options that we want to put forward. And we did a little bit of both in this reduction option list. I think you'll see in the first 5% are really full programs, recognizing that, you know, if we're going to go into the 5% or above category, then, you know, rather than, you know, limiting everyone's capacity, kind of taken from everybody, we'll just take, you know, we're putting full options, full program options on the table. And then how these are working in the second document that you have is the prioritization list for the agencies in terms of the programs. Again, these are not, you know, these are not the programs that the prioritization list is not in terms of, you know, favorability or, you know, who's those types of things. It really is when we look at our core services, our core missions, our representation service to the constituencies, how do they fall in this ranking in terms of where, you know, where we do, you know, how they fall in terms of what we provide to Oregonians, farmers and ranchers around the state. And so that's kind of the prioritization list. That then also guides us in terms of what goes on to the reduction list around, you know, what we can and cannot really either cut or thin down to a capacity level. So I think I'll pause there or even stop there in terms of talking about the reduction list, just because we wanted to, again, these will not be carbon copied into anybody's budget, but they're options for folks to incorporate as they're looking for, you know, either room in budgets or being able to come back and look for reduction options. And this is what we put forward. Obviously, the legislature, the governor's office, they can put anything on the list. They can incorporate whatever they choose. These are just what we have put forward as an agency through this process. So with that, I think any questions around the reduction list? I know we did not go into the actual details of it. It is there. I think the conversation this morning is better spent just trying to talk about why it's there. And then once we see the governor's budget, we can kind of talk about what and if any reduction options made it there and kind of unpack it further there. But happy to also talk about, you know, any questions that folks might have around that.
Elin Miller for the record, just a question just to make sure I'm understanding. So the philosophy of the cut list is instead of, you know, death by 1,000 cuts with lots of different programs, to go ahead and wholesalely do away or put on the table for elimination the full programs. And one, just, and I can understand that philosophy, one, how you might have arrived at it, but secondly, if there are revenues to support the program coming from fees, how does that work? Because I think at least one of these is a fee-driven program, if not both, that were kind of at the top of the list.
So in terms of the other funds?
Yeah, other funds, yeah, and what happens if the program is gone? And then secondly, just again, maybe how you arrived at that. So.
Jonathan, let me take a shot at this. For the record, Lauren Henderson, that's a great question, Elin. So as Jonathan mentioned to you before, I've tried this exercise every which way to sideways, and there isn't a right answer. The first 5% of this list is whole program. It's the entire predator control program for us, and it is the entire PSP program. The pesticide stewardship program has half of that is other funds, and so I think your question is what happens to those other funds? They stay in the program, the pesticide fund. And will be used to operate the rest of the program, the core program. Where that means is we may not need to raise fees to keep up with everything that goes along with it. So that's why that's that way. We tried to put things on the list. If you look at our prioritized list, there isn't a lot of options for general fund. I mean, our core program that's right at the top of the list is food safety. We're not going to get rid of our food safety program, obviously. And so the other places, the second 5% of that list has some fund shifts in it. They are dependent on revenues. And when I did the director's report, I mentioned to you that we're seeing production levels way off. Well, if that's the case, then like all businesses, we're not going to be receiving that other fund's revenue. And it's our job in the director's office to make sure that we're running the agency like a business, so to speak. And I could have all the permission I want from the legislature to spend millions of dollars, but if the cash is not behind it, we can't spend it. And so that's probably something we should talk to the board about, is the other funded programs and the cash and how we manage that. I used to do that for the board many years ago, and I think it was helpful to have that in the back of their mind. Federal funds are the same. We have some things here that are fund shifted maybe to some federal funds. We're dependent on that money coming in as well. So it's a delicate balance to try to figure this out. But the bottom line is, what happens to the programs is they get reduced or eliminated. That does create issues when you have a statutory requirement to do X and then their money's not there. And we've faced that before, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I do want to put on the record, something has to be on this list. It's a law that you put it on there. It does not mean we don't care about these programs. We do. They're all very important. And I've had many a sleepless night trying to figure out, what do I put on here, especially when it might have an implication to our staff. We try to think ahead on these reductions. The lottery funds, you will hear more about that. There's a challenge in the lottery funds on the Constitution on how those are dedicated when the revenues go up. We'll know more about that as that plays out. But that's the list, and we're usually asked about the list by those that create the budget to try to figure out the best way forward. The other challenge we have is you have to really be careful that you don't put multiple lists out there, because then you just give folks 100 things to shoot at instead of maybe a few. So that's the balance we have in this. But my message is, it's not because we don't care about the programs. All agencies have to put things on a list, and it's a hard exercise. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Luisa Santa Maria for the record. I'm going to ask if there are more questions from the people that are joining us remotely. Or comments? No, hear nothing. Then the people in person to have some question or more board members? No? Well, if not, we are going to follow the next agenda. We have the USDA Farm Service Agency coming here to introduce herself.
Madam Chair, as she approaches, I just have a question from a process standpoint. The other item that was on the discussion earlier, could we, and it's in regards to the governor and the next steps as far as selection and how things may go as far as selection of the new director. And could we have some time at the business meeting to discuss this board's role, if any, and what we might like to do? I think some other boards are being involved and weighing in. So if we could put that on the business side. I didn't know how early in this program we needed to state that. Thank you.
Luisa Santa Maria, yes, I think we are going to ask that to put in the business tomorrow. Thank you. All right. Okay, I think we have now, please.
Sure, thank you. My name is Gail Greenman. I am the State Executive Director for the USDA Oregon Farm Service Agency. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm among former colleagues and coworkers, among a current state committee member, which I will get to in just a little bit. Just as a brief introduction on myself, again, I'm Gail Greenman. I was sworn into the Biden-Harris administration in mid-April. Last Friday actually marked my 7-month anniversary. My prior experience professionally has all been in the federal policy realm. For the first 17 years of my career, I advocated for military children, children living on trust and treaty land, and children living in federally owned low-rent housing facilities. After that, I always say I did a good job. I lobbied my husband, which is how I met him. That's how I ended up in Oregon. And that brought me into agriculture. So I spent 15 years advocating for farmers and ranchers all throughout the state. As you all well know, I don't have to tell you, our needs are wide diverse based on the number of crops that we grow, and had the honor of doing that again for about 15 years. I moved over, did a very brief stint with a wonderful economic development group on the west side of the metro area before being given this amazing opportunity, which I am honored and humbled to serve in. As you all know, USDA is a very large federal agency. We touch the lives of all Americans and every day and in very positive ways. And under the leadership of the Biden-Harris administration and Secretary Vilsack, USDA is empowering people and improving their lives. And our mission on behalf of producers and families and communities, we have 5 cross-cutting strategic priorities. The first, addressing climate change via climate smart agriculture, forestry, and clean energy. Advancing racial justice, equity, opportunity, and prosperity, creating more, new, and better market opportunities for producers, tackling food and nutrition insecurity, and making USDA a great federal agency to work for. Specifically, Farm Service Agency is one of many agencies within the department. We are under, there are 8 mission areas, and we are under FPAC, which is the Farm Production and Conservation Mission Area. And so our sister agencies are agencies that you no doubt have heard of: the Risk Management Agency, NRCS, and the Business Center, which for FPAC is kind of our administrative arm. In Oregon specifically, we have 1 state office. We are located about 5 minutes from here in Tualatin, and we have 23 field offices around the state. Most often we're sharing that location with NRCS, rural development, oftentimes soil and water conservation districts. We are led by a state committee. We were honored to have Secretary Vilsack appoint 5 members of our state committee. Brian is one of those members, and they were appointed in mid-September. We also have county committees in every county throughout the state. Currently, actually, county committee ballots were mailed November 7th, so those elections are taking place right now. Ballots are due back on December 5th. But county committees really provide an important link between the ag community and USDA. There are 7,700 producers throughout the country that sit on more than 2,200 county committees. And their intent is really to ensure fair and equitable administration of the Farm Service Agency farm programs, farm loan programs, and they work hand in hand with the state committee. Some highlights, I just wanted to highlight 3 issues that are in great importance. There are many, but I chose 3 just to allow time for questions. Urban agriculture. Urban agriculture is not new in Oregon, specifically in the metro area, but was new in terms of the Farm Bill. It's a policy issue in 2018. So we were honored to be selected as one of the very first urban ag sites in the nation. There are 17 currently. Urban ag was, again, born in Portland, Oregon, farm to table, farm to school, community gardens, community supported agriculture. The list really is endless. But this really, as a national initiative, really gives us an opportunity to shine. So we're really lucky and fortunate to be able to stand this program up. Whether a farm is in a rural area or in the middle of a city, USDA and the Farm Service Agency, we're here to assist those customers and those producers. We know that food and nutrition is inextricably linked to health, and urban ag really plays an important role in growing fresh and healthy and available produce, providing jobs, beautifying neighborhoods, and providing access to that nutritious food. In late August, I guess it was, we had our People's Garden dedication. USDA is known as the People's Department. We are named for our founder, President Abraham Lincoln. And we had our People's Garden dedication in the largest affordable housing neighborhood in North Portland. And I can tell you just from being there, I didn't know what to expect walking in. And I left with a real sense of what this urban agriculture movement was all about. And we heard from people in the community who use the garden to grow food, most often native to their country and their culture. Even if they could find it in Portland, Oregon, they wouldn't be able to afford it. And the stories that we heard were emotional and breathtaking, to say the least. I want to take a few minutes to focus on the Inflation Reduction Act. We all know that farming is risky, it's unpredictable. That's an understatement. Even the most prepared and experienced producers find themselves in states of distress. And the Inflation Inflation Reduction Act provided $3.1 billion for USDA to provide assistance to distressed borrowers. That's going to be implemented in a manner that really reflects the Biden-Harris commitment to preventing foreclosures, keep people farming, and keep farmland in agriculture. And the first phase was really, which is what we are in the midst of right now, is to prevent any further deterioration. Specific assistance to borrowers really depends on those very specific circumstances. But right now, I can tell you we've already made $600 million in payments to approximately 11,000 direct and guaranteed loan borrowers that were 60 days or more delinquent. So not only have we caught them up, but we've paid their next payment. And for Oregon specifically, that means approximately 200 borrowers in the state receive the first phase of those payments. We will be doing additional phases, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what that first phase looks like and how it's going to benefit Oregon agriculture. And then the third issue I just wanted to touch on, which everybody is abuzz about, is the 2023 Farm Bill. In my prior life, I worked 3 farm bills. I actually worked 4 farm bills. The first one was just a very specific issue, but 2008, 2014, and the 2018 farm bills, I was very much a part of it with specific regard to Oregon agriculture. So we look forward as an agency to working with the bipartisan group in Congress, stakeholders, and the public to ensure that farm bill programs, farm loan programs in the department will be implemented to best serve all the people. So I will stop there and open it up to any questions you may have.
Chair, good morning, Gail.
Good morning, Lauren.
Lauren Henderson, I am so delighted that you're here. Thank you for coming. One of the things that I wanted to ask, and you brought up the Farm Bill, was when Jonathan and I were at NASDA, there was a lot of discussion around maybe having discussions in the Farm Bill process about how to make the disaster programs fit better with what's happening, particularly in Oregon. And this is more of a comment than a question. We're seeing cumulative impacts. It's not one event. It's event after event after event. So I know NASDA will be, and we supported the resolution to really dive in and see. You know, I don't think it's well understood, and I'm going to get the percent wrong, but some 70% or more of the Farm Bill is on nutrition in those programs. And if you're not supporting those that are growing it, you have no food to do on the other side of that. And I thought that was a good point that was made at NASDA, that you have to connect all of that together. And so that's just a comment for you to think about as you internally talk about the disaster programs. We had the disaster assistance program that ODA put out there and helped a couple hundred, 300 maybe, with about $20 million. And the folks I talked to did exactly what you just said. It really helped them. They probably wouldn't be in a farm today if they wouldn't have had that assistance. And I know your Oregon numbers are super important to help folks get through that. But I just want to make that comment that I think that's going to be an important, the Farm Bill is always important, but I think particularly around the disaster assistance this time around, given what we're seeing year after year.
No, and Lauren, I think that's a very important comment. And so what I would add is what's very important to the Secretary is to make these disaster payments. First of all, we all hope that we wouldn't have to make disaster payments, that we wouldn't have the disasters to begin with. But we know, from June of 2020, or I should say from September to 2020 through June of 2021, we saw wildfire, we saw smoke, we saw drought, we saw heat damage, we saw ice damage. We saw an immense amount of damage to agriculture in a 9-month span that we typically never see. And so it's very important to the Secretary, not just for Oregon producers, but for all producers, is to make these payments as streamlined, as quick as possible. Admittedly, we are paying right now in 2020 and 2021 disasters through the ERP, which is the Emergency Relief Program. We are just about, we think, at the tail end of phase 1. We anticipate phase 2 very shortly. Part of phase 1 was providing producers payments, those producers who had insurance essentially. And so we could track their data very easily through RMA. And every producer who qualified was sent a letter saying all you have to do is self-certify, come into your local farm service agency office, one of those 23 offices that I mentioned, and payments, will start flowing. So in terms of federal programs, that worked really, really well. We do know that a lot of producers who don't carry crop insurance, specifically in Oregon, with all of our abundance of specialty crops, again, they don't carry those crop insurance for many different reasons. Most often what I hear is because of costs. And so that phase 2 will really get at those producers who don't have those insurance needs, but did have disaster and that affected their bottom line.
Elin Miller for the record. Thanks for joining us. I had a chance to meet you last summer. And I think along those lines for the crop insurance, at least from my personal focus on grapes and hazelnuts, again, sometimes those specialty crop, the programs itself are not necessarily don't fit as well. And is there something that we can do in working with you to ensure that I think what was historically, obviously, huge commodity crops important focus for crop insurance make more sense for some of our specialty crops in Oregon and maybe a process to go through and doing that? I know that Alexis, Lauren, you guys were working earlier on and working with the governor's office and so, but is there something that we can look at doing for that?
So I think the answer is twofold, Elin. I think the first is, and one of the priorities of mine is outreach to our customers and our potential customers. I think there are a lot of producers who probably don't understand or even know what the Farm Service Agency is and what we can offer. Obviously, we are primarily we have two tracks, the farm program track and the farm loan track. But one of the things that we need to be doing and doing better is outreach. And so on my, in my first 6 months, I kind of got a lay of the land and said, well, where are the things that we really need to improve upon? And so starting in 2023, every month, my goal is to have a stakeholder meeting, and that's with member associations, not just their staff, but also extending that invitation to their members. This is what we're doing on the farm program side, on the farm loan side, but also what is it that you need? And part of that, getting to your specific question, is really educating producers specifically on NAP. So NAP coverage is way underutilized in our state. And I think it's in part because we haven't done our part in outreach and letting producers know that this is a viable option. And so that's one of the things we'll be doing. The second answer, or the second part to that question, is I think it's really important that stakeholders communicate with their legislators, especially as we go into a Farm Bill year. This is our turn. This is the time to make changes. And so when stakeholders see a problem, communicating those problems and see if they can be written in a different way or a better way in the next Farm Bill.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Oh, yes. I already asked, but I can ask again. If somebody online has any question. I don't know. We asked that before, but we didn't hear anything. Still, I think we're good, right? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Luisa Santa Maria for the record. We're going to continue with our agenda, and we have our item 4 about pesticides stewardship partnership program discussion. So we have presenters Gilberto Uribe and Catherine Riefenberg.
Morning. For the record, Isaac Stapleton. Good morning, Chair Santa Maria, members of the board. We're going to discuss with you today the Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Program, and I'll do a quick introduction, and I'll turn it over to Gilbert and Catherine. So Jonathan spoke earlier this morning about the budget reduction list. The PSP program is one that's on that reduction list, and I think what you'll hear today is really the importance of the program and the good work that the program does. So that's not the reason that it's on the list. We value this program. It's a voluntary program that contains general funds. So that's part of the reason and rationale for it making that list. And I think Lauren can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think over the last several budget cycles, it has been on the list because it's a voluntary program and contains that general fund. So that's part of the reason. So I have here with me today Gilbert Uribe. He is our new licensing and certification and product registration program manager for the pesticides program. And then Catherine Riffenberg, who is the pesticide stewardship partnership coordinator. Also in the room is David Gruen. He is her counterpart with DEQ. So if there's any questions that come up through this discussion, David is here to field some of those from DEQ side of things. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gilbert.
Good morning, everybody. Gilbert Uribe. It's nice to see and meet some of you for the first time and see some of you after a long time. So we'll go ahead and get started. As Isaac mentioned, Gilbert Uribe, the program manager for the pesticides program, product registration, licensing, and other program sub-program areas. I've been in the role here for about 6 weeks now, since Rose Kajadorian retired. And so I'm going to start off with the giving an overview and background of the PSP program. So to give an overview of the presentation that we'll be giving today, we'll be talking about what the Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Program is. We'll give a little bit of the PSP background, some of the jurisdictional roles that are shared between ODA and DEQ, how the PSP functions in terms of education, water quality, and data collection, the collection events for pesticide waste, the successes and challenges, areas of focus, and then we'll have time for some questions at the end. So what is the PSP? The PSP is a voluntary non-regulatory program. The goal of the PSP is to reduce off-target pesticide movement into streams and improve water quality in the areas that it serves. The methods used to do this are to use water quality data to focus educational efforts and provide technical assistance to address impaired waterways. Currently, there are 8 active PSP areas in the state. One of them, the 9th in Yamhill, is on hold, but there are conversations about getting somebody to fill in and take the lead in that area to address the issues in the area. The Hood River PSP is the oldest PSP that's been part of the program, and Deschutes is the newest one, just as an FYI. Until 2013, the PSP had been funded by grants and other sources of funding, and since 2013, the legislature has provided stable funding for monitoring and other program elements, with 50% coming from general fund and the other 50% of the funding coming from pesticide registration fees. Oh, okay. The next slide, please, Carla. And then I'm moving on to the next one now too. Thank you. So as I mentioned, Hood River was the first PSP, pesticide stewardship partner. It started in 1999. And so the way that it started was that there were elevated organophosphate insecticides detected in the water that were past the water quality standards for fish. Then that's kind of what kickstarted the program. Overall, the Water Quality Pesticide Management Team, which is formed by different partner agencies, manage the Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Program with the Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Advisory Group serving to provide advice to the Water Quality Pesticide Management Team. The PSP Advisory Group is formed by different industry groups and representatives of other organizations that provide feedback and advice for the PSP. The PSP, although it's a voluntary program, does serve and fill the needs of other water quality management requirements in the state. So the PSP serves to fill in as an alternative to what's known as a 303D listing, which is for impaired waterways. That list specifically is developed by DEQ and updated every 2 years and submitted to EPA. And so the PSP serves as an alternative to that, to those requirements. The PSP also serves to fill in the requirements of the ODA's cooperative agreement with the EPA in terms of water quality management with regard to pesticides. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. So the EPA cooperative agreement is an agreement that the ODA has with EPA that delegates some of the responsibilities, regulatory responsibilities for the management of pesticides in the state from the federal government. And so as the FIFRA state lead agency, the ODA develops this cooperative agreement with the US EPA. One of the requirements of this cooperative agreement is that we develop and implement a state water quality pesticide management plan, and that we report water quality improvement efforts and activities in the state. And so the state, we do that through the PSP program, and the EPA allows and accepts that to be the case. So the plan focuses on protecting waters from the contamination of pesticides. For the currently registered pesticide products used in Oregon, the legacy pesticides, which are pesticides that had been previously used but are no longer used in approved products, are addressed by DEQ through the Clean Water Act. So that's where the shared responsibilities between ODA and DEQ, or parts of it, are. And the PSP, as I mentioned, satisfies the requirements of the EPA approved plan that's required. Next slide, please. So just to briefly cover some of the jurisdictional roles that DEQ and ODA play in the PSP, the Oregon Department of Agriculture is the EPA designated state lead agency for the regulation of current use pesticides and registered pesticides. The ODA develops and implements the pesticide management plan. It also develops the water quality portion of the EPA cooperative agreement. It's also the lead with that. It's the lead agency for the PSP program. It administers the PSP biennial budget and grants to the PSP partners. And it's the lead. It leads the pesticide collection events that are held for the public. The Department of Environmental Quality conducts data analysis for the statewide pesticides of concern that are identified in the PSP program. They provide watershed partners with technical assistance in the monitoring and sampling of their areas. They develop the seasonal monitoring schedules for the PSPs, and they identify emerging pesticide analysis priorities for DEQ lab method development. So any new detection methods or analyses that need to be developed are handled by the DEQ. And with that, I'll pass it over to Catherine.
Hi, everyone. As Isaac mentioned, I'm Catherine Heisenberg. I'm the Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Coordinator. And I will take you through the rest of the slides. So Carla, can we have the next slide? As Isaac mentioned, there's currently 8 active PSP basins around the state. The 9th one in Yamhill is on pause. Within each PSP area, we select sites in a group effort with DEQ and our local lead partners. So that would be either a watershed council or a soil and water conservation district to represent a wide variety of land use within that PSP basin. So on this slide, it's showing the upstream land use of all our PSP sites combined. So we have a pretty decent mix of urban, ag, and forestry. The other could include things like other waterways, wetlands, barren land, as it's termed in GIS. Next slide. So the PSP functions as a positive feedback loop with the water quality monitoring constantly driving the education, outreach, and technical assistance being done in a basin. So each year our PSP partners sample or monitor for pesticides. From that data, we identify priority pesticides or areas of concern. We and our local partners create education, outreach, or technical assistance that is voluntary for the local pesticide users that creates behavior change around pesticide use. So the goal of the program is not to reduce pesticide use or eliminate pesticide use. It's really to prevent pesticide movement and keep pesticides on site and prevent that movement into streams. So from that education, outreach, and technical assistance that's done annually, we then do follow-up monitoring to determine the effectiveness of those voluntary efforts. Depending on the success of those efforts, we add or remove sites as needed, and then start the process all over again. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about past education and outreach efforts, but as we move forward, we've realized that the education and outreach isn't just for the pesticide users. ODA and DEQ, the water quality pesticide management team, really does have a large role and responsibility in making sure our locals are educated and informed and have the resources they need to go interact with the local pesticide users in that area. So starting about 2 years ago, and it will continue to ramp up, we've really been focusing on education for our local lead partners. Each biennium, so every 2 years, we fund our partners with the PSP Partner Grant. Those grants will cover the water quality monitoring and any special projects the local leads want to do, any outreach and education efforts, or the creation of a strategic plan. And that strategic plan will identify priority pesticides of concern, areas of concern, and how each basin plans to manage and work with those areas. In the past and currently, we have IPM workshops are a common way of educating pesticide users in the area. There's also spray calibration workshops, and 2 of our PSP partners are actually on the call and are going to be able to answer questions, but each have had an IPM workshop or a spray calibration workshop annually. Some of the PSP areas are developing locally relevant fact sheets to a specific commodity group or based on their pesticides of concern in an area. There's been installation of weather stations and then buffer strips and other things to minimize spraying near streams. Next slide, please. So I started in late September of 2021. David Gruen started in February of this year, and we've really taken the time to sort of revamp the process and look at what's working and what's not. And so we've made significant changes to the grant process this cycle. So the grants were released to the partners in September, and they'll submit their proposals in March. But some of the major changes we made is we will no longer fund applications that only focus on monitoring. Every grant must have an education component, and those education components must be based on the water quality data that we're seeing on an annual basis. David with DEQ and I will sit down with the partners annually and during this grant process to discuss areas of concern and potential projects that might address any water quality areas of interest that we're seeing. All of the education, outreach, and technical assistance that is funded must have clear and measurable goals. There's a requirement for an annual and final report that have specific units and metrics that we're going to measure through time. And those reports were released with the grant application, so our partners have a clear understanding of what we are looking for and how ODA plans to track success over the years. To create more equity among our local PSP partners, we've set a flat fee per the number of samples taken during the grant period. The the salary range and the amount requested for monitoring varied widely between the PSP areas, and it was happening that the PSP areas that were more well-funded and had specific grant writing staff and were already, quote, well off remain so, and the PSP partners that had less staff, had less funding, had less resources available to them were remaining the same through this PSP grant. And so that just kind of flatlines that monitoring and provides a more equitable division of the monitoring funds. In the past, partners have taken flow sampling. That's been taken in a wide variety of ways. Some are using flow meters, some are using gauges that are set at a site. Some areas are taking water quality samples, and then at a separate time of day, another partner or staff is going out and taking the flow samples separately. And so we want scientifically defensible data. And so ODA and DEQ are working towards a better way of getting that flow data for the partners that's more standardized across all the basins. Next slide, please. So the water quality is also funded by the PSP grants. Our local partners will go out to 5 to 11 sample sites in their basin in spring and fall and collect water quality samples. They ship those to DEQ where they're analyzed for over 130 pesticides, pesticide degradates, and some legacy pesticides. Each year, the data is presented to the partners at the beginning of the year and made available on DEQ's website. And now DEQ has released a data viewer, and the data is now uploaded weekly as it becomes available onto the data viewer. Next slide, please. So the data viewer is an interactive tool that displays historic and current PSP monitoring data. It allows our partners to analyze the data in real time as questions come up in their meetings with pesticide users. In the past, how it's worked is DEQ and ODA gave our partners a presentation with all the graphs. If someone in a meeting asked a question to our partners and they didn't already have that graph available, they would have to come back to DEQ, ask for that graph to be created, ask for those numbers to be analyzed, and then go back and follow up with the asker of the question, the pesticide user. This allows for more real-time conversations and kind of creates more accountability and trust with the local pesticide user community when it comes to talking about data. The data viewer was first presented to our advisory group in 2018. Based on feedback we got from the advisory group, the crop layer was removed and additional language was added for clarification around the sampling points. If you can see on the right-hand side of the screen or on your paper, that's generally what the home screen of the data viewer looks like. So you can filter the data by a date range, you can filter it by basin, you can see the different ways you can look at the data on the top right. And so it allows for our partners to be able to interact with the data, but you can't download the data and you can't change the data. So prior to this, some of our partners were just getting Excel spreadsheets with the raw data. I don't think anyone would ever intentionally change the data, but it allows for human error, and this removes that variability out of that. Next slide. So this is one of the graphs that can come out of the data viewer. This focused on imidacloprid, which is a pesticide of concern in a lot of the basins. So this is just an example of what can come out of the data viewer. It shows the average concentrations and the detection frequency of imidacloprid statewide. So for all the basins over the years, it shows the water quality benchmark and how those average concentrations compare to the benchmark. One thing to note about imidacloprid is our threshold for finding it in the PSP is higher than the benchmark. So whenever we find imidacloprid in our sampling, it's always going to be over the benchmarks. So there's that caveat on that. Next slide, please. And then the data viewer also shows the sampling site locations with the upstream land use for each of the points. Previously, our partners had this information, so they had the data and they had the sampling locations on their websites. And this just consolidates it into one space now. Next slide. And so there's a third component of the PSP that doesn't really fit under water quality monitoring or education, and that's the pesticide collection events. They are incredibly attended. We try to break it up so there's 3 west of the Cascades and 3 east of the Cascades every year. Since 2006, over 730,000 pounds of pesticides, either unusable or unwanted, have been collected. This year with the new chlorpyrifos ruling, we went and had all our collection events, so all 6 in 1 year to accommodate any extra needs for disposal. So we had them in Pendleton, Ontario, Clackamas, Medford, Mount Angel, and Madras. And these are specifically for pesticide users, agricultural landowners, forestry landowners, and on occasion will entertain inventory from a retailer that's collected products from their local community and need to be returned. We found DDT gets turned in a lot. We found 55 gallon drums of the pesticides needed to make Agent Orange have been collected. Any other little ones? It's just a really good way to get really old pesticides that potentially don't have labels out of the environment. And it happens a lot that when farms change hands, you'll go through and clean out a barn and you're finding things that you don't know what they are and don't know what to get rid of or how to get rid of it. And this program helps people in that scenario. And then if there's a situation where it might be hazardous to move or the product is degraded or eroded so much that it can't safely be moved, we'll send Clean Harbors, which is the company, out to the site and they'll just collect it on site. Next slide, please. So just some noteworthy things about the collection events and the happenings around that. The furthest distance anyone has driven to attend is 1.5 hours, so an hour and a half. When I was down in the White City, Medford area this past year, someone had driven from the Klamath Falls area. The largest event we've ever had was 54 participants, and the most quantity or the highest quantity we've ever collected was about 48,000 pounds. Our largest event this year was at Mount Angel. We collected about 21,000 pounds and had about 45 participants. And then I just listed some significant inventory that we've collected over the years. Next slide, please. And so as we work through the cycle of the water quality, driving the education and outreach, and then seeing the effectiveness of the education and outreach, we do see successes in different basins around the state. So most recently in Middle Rogue, there's a lot of oxyfluorocarbon detections in Jackson Creek between 2015 and 2018. And that wasn't necessarily noteworthy, but it was only found in Jackson Creek and only at one sampling location. The Middle Rogue partners have a really good connection with the OSU Extension agent. So those Soil and Water Conservation District down there and the OSU Extension agent, Gordon Jones, started talking to pesticide users in that area. In the conversations they had a pesticide user say, yes, I use a lot of oxyfluorophane. I didn't know anyone was monitoring. I'm really sorry. I don't want to pollute the waters. And so they kind of let them know about the data, about the PSP and its voluntary nature. The pesticide user installed straw wattles. They did a better job of monitoring the weather. They reduced the application of that pesticides and they switched to an alternative pesticide in some applications. And since then, there's been no detections in 2020 and only one detection in 2021. So you can see the detection frequency and concentrations drop over the years. Next slide, please. A few years ago, Diaron in the Walla Walla Basin was showing some really high concentrations. The local partner there worked with the irrigation district and they switched from spraying Diaron in the roadside ditches and other ditches to mechanical control, which was flaming them, and along with some spot spraying with some less toxic herbicide. And you can see that the concentrations again dropped and have remained low ever since. Next slide, please. And there are some programmatic challenges. We bump up to the capacity of our partners. Some of the smaller watersheds councils we were working with were just a staff of one. And so that staff was the executive director, was the person going out sampling, was the education coordinator. And with all their other roles and grants and projects, the PSP is time consuming and that can be hard for a staff of one to juggle. There's high staff turnover in some areas. So for instance, one of our partners recently lost their executive director, their education coordinator, and their ag water quality person all within a 3-month span. And so we're continuously having to try to educate new staff, make sure there's some continuity with the program and with the sampling, even with the staff turnover. We do see that PSP areas with 1 or 2 crops, agricultural crops, tend to see more progress and more success because it is easier to make relationships with 1 or 2 commodity groups and, you know, a handful of landowners that are meeting regularly rather than in areas like Marion County or Yamhill that have high crop diversity. And that's not to say that one area is working harder than the other, but by nature, it is harder to create outreach and education specific to one crop commodity group or one pesticide type when it is so varied. And then we also have minimal records of past educational events. So when we look to the past and say like what's been successful, what hasn't been successful, there's not a lot of records prior to 2021 of what's been done and how successful it was. And that's one a big push moving forward. And then we also have the capacity of the DEQ lab. So they're receiving and analyzing all our samples, and they also have other priorities and projects that they're trying to juggle. Next slide. So our current areas of focus are program evaluation, which began when I was hired in late September, early October of 2021. We're really trying to meet with the partners and meet with people we've worked with in the past and determine what's worked, what was successful, what wasn't, what can we do for our partners to help them feel better prepared to go out and have conversations with pesticide users. We've increased support for the local pesticide partners or the local PSP partners. So we're meeting with them twice a year to discuss what's working in an area, what they might need help with, share ideas, share resources, and then some education based on, you know, the pesticides of concern or something we're seeing statewide that we're hoping to share with them. We, again, have additional education and technical assistance requirements in the next grant cycle, and we've tried to increase communication and collaboration with our local partners. Next slide. We're starting to reevaluate what pesticides are included in the analysis we do. This was on the minds of ODA and DEQ for a while, but now that the lab has the capacity, we really would like to expand what pesticides are being analyzed for. As I'm sure everyone's aware, new chemistries are coming out every year, potentially every month, and we want to make sure that we're sampling for what's actually being used in an area. We're reevaluating how to collect the flow data, and we're increasing technical assistance and educational support. Next slide, please. That's it. Any questions?
Before we get to questions, Isaac Stapleton for the record. Just want to mention, Catherine talked a little bit about the data viewer and some of the feedback that the agency received around the data viewer and some changes that were made in response to that feedback. Those conversations are continuing with DEQ and the water quality management team around the data viewer, making sure that it's clear that the way we take the data, it's driven to find pesticides in the water at the time that they're being used. And so it can't really be used to represent generalizable data around water quality in that particular stream or basin. And so trying to make sure that that's clear. So we're continuing to work on that with DEQ as we move forward. And so you may see additional changes to the data viewer in the future just to reflect that and make that abundantly clear that the intent of the samples and our sampling methods. So just wanted to put that in there as well.
Hi, Elin Miller for the record. Really appreciate that last comment because I think it was the last day of our last board meeting that an OPP article came out where it was stated that this data viewer information was useful to have people choose where to fish and swim. And the correlation between what the trigger is for aquatics and all of that versus a human health. Anyway, it was just, I think what it can do is make industry and farmers who, way back when, in fact, that same article talked about a former member of this board who helped promote and start this program early on and how important the program is, might actually have people run away from the program and not want to be part of the program. So I really hope that it can be a cooperative focus. And I understand there's an advisory committee that wasn't mentioned in this presentation at all, and what role that advisory committee could play. And again, providing you guys the background and perspectives of what the thoughts are, because it needs to be a partnership, because it's just really, really critical. And it has solved some huge issues that I remember way back when in my days of doing some of this stuff. And it was a big success, particularly up at Hood River. And I think it can continue to be, but again, it needs to be balanced a bit. So I was concerned about that article when I saw it.
Yeah, Elin, thanks for that comment. You're right. The advisory committee is an important part of the program, and I think through COVID things slowed down and conversations weren't necessarily as robust as they may have been had we not had to go through that. But yeah, we do engage regularly with our advisory group and get feedback, and that's where some of that feedback around the data viewer initially came from, and met with Director Taylor at the time and DEQ's director, and made some adjustments there. But I think there's always ongoing discussions on how we can make the program better.
Luisa Santamaria for the record. You have two other people here in the list. Do you mind to introduce them? I think they are joining virtually. I don't know.
Yeah, they are joining virtually. Catherine, do you want to introduce our PSP partners?
Sure. We have Chris Shadell from the Hood River Soil and Water Conservation District and Cora from the Jackson County Soil and Water Conservation District. They're two of our local lead partners and can talk about how the PSP is run in that area.
Corey, do you want to start maybe?
Sure. I wasn't sure who was going first. All right. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. I think. Sorry, I'm less used to Teams. All right. Can everyone this PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Corey Mousseau, and I am with Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District. I'm our community water resource conservationist. I am with the Middle Rogue Pesticide Stewardship Partnership. I help coordinate us down here. And I'm going to just kind of give you an overview of what we have going on down here. And then I think we'll have a little Q&A period after Chris presents as well. I'm going to time myself so I don't go over. Okay, so I think you briefly saw this map earlier, but here we are located all the way down here in the Middle Rogue, kind of all by ourselves down in Southern Oregon. And specifically, we're located in Jackson County. Something notable about Jackson County, I know all of the PSPs are a bit different since, we have a lot of land in the state. We have a lot of land use. There's just a lot going on. We have forest land, we have ag, when we have many different crops down here. We have developed areas. We have riparian areas, and so there's a lot going on. And so this is kind of a general theme of it being a little more challenging for education and outreach, just because there's a lot of players to contact and lots of different types of pesticides that could be used in multiple sectors or, overlapping. So just something to note here. We have a lot of land uses going on down here. This is just a wildfire scar. I wanted to note back in 2020, we all heard about the fires. Fires did affect our some of our sampling areas, particularly one in Talent. Surprisingly, we sampled afterwards and there wasn't any additional pesticides afterwards, but I thought I'd note that we did do some subsequent sampling post-fire to make sure that there was not going to be additional overflow from that. So here are our sampling locations. We've been sampling from the same location since 2020. We've been functioning as a PSP since, 2014 was our pilot year. And so we've been going strong since 2015. And then I joined in 2016. And so these are our four main kind of sub-basins that we're sampling from. And we are trying to parse out different land use for each of them. So Wagner is primarily forestry above. We actually used to have an additional site for Wagner, but there really was no significant difference between up and downstream. So we decided to utilize that extra site for other locations. We have Payne and Jackson Creek. You heard about Jackson Creek when Catherine was talking about the success story of oxyfluorocarbon here locally. And both of those areas primarily capture ag runoff, a little bit of other stuff, but it's mostly ag. And then Lone Pine, we selected as of 2020, hopefully to capture more urban runoff. I highlighted that in red because that's definitely our most problematic creek here. And I'll get into that in a little bit, or actually the next slide regarding the data for that. But we certainly want to focus on that creek more and do some more outreach efforts in that area. So this is a brief summary a brief condensed version of our summary. We put out annual summaries. The past few years we've done this. And so this is just kind of it all condensed, kind of wordy on the left, but this is to note with Lone Pine. Out of all of the samples that we took, 100% of the benchmark exceedances came from Lone Pine. And so again, we definitely want to focus on this area more. And out of all of the detections that were present, 91% were from Lone Pine. So yeah, just noting that we're not done in that area. We're just starting. We have some theories, but you know, it is a voluntary effort, so we want to approach it with kind of not pinpointing any area because we really don't know for sure, but lots of possibilities, and we just need some more years of data behind us. And yeah, so that's regarding the Lone Pine area. To the right, we have a table of our different pesticides of concern, our top 4. These are in the high category that we included in our report. As you can see, the detection frequency in these little bars vary between 2016 to 2021. The oxyfluorophane certainly went down after the success story in Jackson Creek, and imidacloprid, not surprisingly, as Catherine mentioned, with the benchmark, it has gone up, but it also could have gone up because we switched into Lone Pine as of 2020. So that is a very, very brief summary of our data. We do annual meetings every year, and those recordings are on our website if you want more of an overview of our data in more detail. So going into more of our meetings and how we function as a team. So we have a lot of different groups. Some of us meet more often than others, but we have kind of this network that we've created. So we have the greater MRPSP, I call it, which is basically all the groups together, all of our stakeholders and partners, including the general public. And so this is where we'll have our annual summary meetings, and we can get everyone together. Lately, it's been virtually, of course, to discuss the group and go over the data in more of a, you know, in a public way that everyone's going to be able to understand. We'll distill the data a bit more. So that's the greater group. We then have our technical advisory committee. That is also our data review meeting. And so that is where we'll discuss the data results with state and local partners, and then discuss some next steps from there. And we tend to have those every January. So we'll be having that coming up sooner than later. And then we have our coordinating council, and this is our main educating group where we think about those next steps of education and outreach, trying to fulfill the goals of our strategic plan. You know, we have this data, and now what do we do with it? And so we have a couple subgroups from our coordinating councils. We have our main event planning group, and then we have various sector groups. Since we have so much land use here, we have 6 different sector groups. We have met with all of these groups formally, but it's mostly just an email coordination where if we have a specific question on a particular sector, we can ask our sector group lead, and then they can ask the sector group what their thoughts are. And yeah, so that's kind of the network that we have set up. These are our main objectives and goals from our strategic plan. I won't bore you with reading them out, but that is on our website if you're interested. And so our main education and outreach, obviously COVID has delayed some of our bigger goals that we had a few years back when we were first drafting the strategic plan, but we've been able to do a couple things consistently. So number one, we've been able to conduct those annual meetings and summary reports, as I had mentioned, and all of those can be located on our website, jswcd.org, and you can find the PSP page in many different ways. I think I have a next slide that's a little clearer, but we have, it's two-page PDFs for the summary reports, and then all of our annual meetings are recorded. And those tend to happen in March of every year. And then we also do regular IPM festivals. We've done a couple lately. I don't know if they're necessarily going to be every year, but maybe every other year. It's kind of to be determined. But we just did one back in September, so pretty recently, where we had an all-day event learning about kind of everyone learned generally about PSP, different land uses, different types of, you know, just IPM approaches, and then there were field demonstrations as well. The folks that attended, we wanted to, you know, invite everyone. Everyone was welcome to join. It was mostly applicators, which wasn't too surprisingly. They were offered ODA credit, so that got people in the door. But we are hoping in the future to reach out to more landscapers as well. We had invited them, but It'd be nice to have some more incentives for those folks to show up so we can kind of focus on more of the urban side as well. But those are our two main: education. And then here's a little clearer view of our website, where we just house it on our district website. There's many different ways that you can access this page. You can go under our water tab, partners, or services, or just type it in the search bar. So yeah, but that's where you're going to find kind of an overview of our local PSP. And then we have all of our summaries linked there as well. Just a quick shout out to all of our partners to continue us in taking this data and then also helping with the next steps for education. And then this is my contact info. And if anyone has questions, we can discuss that during that Q&A time. And I think I have 15 seconds left, so I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Cora. All right, we can turn it over to Chris next. Unless we want to do questions now. So, all right, Chris, to you.
Okay, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. First off, thank you all for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to introduce myself and speak with you all. I'm about to get shown up from those beautiful PowerPoint presentations, one in which I did not create. So it'll just be me kind of talking to you about the Hood River Pesticide Stewardship Partnership program. And my name is Chris Shadell, and I work here at the Hood River Soil and Water Conservation District. And as it was stated, you know, the PSP program originated with us and was in direct response to agricultural products being found in the waterways, and has been touted as quite the success story, one that I'm honored to continue and to speak with you all about. Off the bat, Hood River is unique in a lot of ways. Our county is our service area. It's also our watershed. We have one major river, the Hood River, that all our tributaries drain to. And we do have some varied land use, a little bit of urban, some forestry, but primarily our land use is agriculture, high value perennial tree fruit, and is comprised of namely two crops, pears and cherries. We do have blueberries, wine grapes, as well as apples, but principally it's cherries and pears. So we've really used this monitoring program to identify what products are making it into the waterways and where, the source of these products and for what purpose, and then how we can mitigate the impacts of these products on the environment. And this monitoring for over the last 20 years has really been necessary for us to use as the basis of every conversation we have working with pesticide applicators. It's really important that these conversations have been based in science because there's often misconceptions of what is actually happening in the water columns and on the ground, kind of either way you're coming at it from. There's, you know, misconceptions that our waterways are really polluted and toxic and harmful. And then on the flip side, there's kind of a misconception that it's not something we need to worry about and shouldn't be a priority. And as with every conversation, the reality usually falls somewhere in the middle. So the PSP program results and accurate communication has been really integral to guiding our conversations and educational efforts, as well as on the ground work. It's led to really excellent, long-lasting partnerships with the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs, Oregon State University Extension, and the Columbia Gorge Fruit Growers Association. Efforts kind of right off the bat before it was like regularly funded. A lot of the PSP program was funded by the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs, and they spearheaded a really robust riparian planting effort with the Fruit Growers Association to get spray buffers implemented in waterways running through orchards. But in recent years, it's really been kind of a monitoring and reporting effort. But the topic of pesticides has recently, and I mean, as always, but really more so recently, provided this really unique opportunity to kind of overlap objectives and be very successful. They are expensive and represent a really high cost to bottom lines of farms and farm economics, and the viability of farms. There's recent concerns of pest and disease resistance to pesticide products and our ability to create a viable product. They pose risks to human health and our farm worker community, and they can impact non-target species and environmental quality. So with all that said, you know, really in reality, nobody wants to use these things, and in a perfect world, we wouldn't. But the goals can kind of become to use pesticides with prudence and precaution, to use them sparingly with targeted, timely, and effective applications, and in a way that minimizes our minimizes our risk to farm workers, our community, and the environment. So these goals really, really, really line up. And in recent years, we've recognized this and aligned our education and outreach with these goals. A clear example of this is our air blast sprayer calibration training that we've facilitated last spring, and we'll do so again this upcoming spring. We utilize course instructors from the Washington State Department of Agriculture, which I cannot speak more highly of. These guys are very good at what they do and very good instructors. And they provided 2 days of bilingual education, both in the classroom and hands-on in the field, to calibrate equipment for pesticide applications. So this is really to get a targeted, accurate product application for better pest and disease control. But this also mitigates impact to spraying these products effectively to mitigate impacts to human health and in the environment. We had over 50 people participate in this workshop this past spring. Another clear example of kind of these goals aligning was a workshop we facilitated just a couple weeks ago. And I want to say thank you to Gilbert for making the long rainy drive out. That meant a lot, and he was able to introduce himself to the group. We had a workshop with course instructor Leo Garcia out of the Wenatchee Valley area, where we really emphasized orchard pest and disease identification, life cycle, control measures, timing when these pests and disease are vulnerable, the kind of whys of why we do what we do. And we wove into these trainings pesticide safety, calibration, mitigating impacts on the environment, keeping pesticides on target out of the waterways, and reducing impact again to human health and environmental health. For these 2-day workshops, we had over 85 people in attendance. The classes were delivered in Spanish and very, very well received. At the end of these workshops, we always survey our participants and follow up with these orchardists. And we've really seemingly obviously identified a clear and overwhelming need for horticultural education, bilingual education here in the Hood River and Mid-Columbia region. You know, trainings for people already working in the industry where we can come at it from a farm economic standpoint, a fruit quality standpoint, pesticide safety, and mitigating the impacts on our waterways. These things really line up well. So moving forward, we will be hosting a meeting with orchardists, a lot of our participants, farm foremen, crew leads, orchard owners, to really create regular, meaningful, and a robust bilingual training program to address the needs that we have here. We'll be partnering with OSU, ODA, WSDA, contractors as course instructors, other conservation districts, the Fruit Growers Association, Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs. It really, really is a communal effort. And then out of the PSP program, there is also an on-the-ground component. We are now kind of holding the reins on the spray buffer installations in orchard ways and adjacent farmlands. So this spring, we will be planting over 2,000 feet of riparian buffer adjacent orchards. And so, yeah, kind of circling back to the PSP program, the PSP program really is the foundation of this work that we're doing. And it really is imperative that we have the data to point to say that, you know, hey, growers here are really doing a pretty darn good job. And that is what our data is showing us. However, we still always have more work to do because our data is not perfect yet and things are finding its way into the water. And as we know, pest and disease pressures change and evolve, and our spray programs here look very different than they did 20 years ago. A clear example of this would be the emergence of spotted wing Drosophila in our cherry crops. And this has really knocked back what was once an almost organic spray program into a fairly heavy-handed spray schedule. So, you know, moving forward, we need to recognize things are always changing. As Catherine mentioned, new products are coming online. Other ones are getting phased out. New pests and disease pressures are emerging. Crops are slowly evolving, you know, and changing as farms change hands and economics change. So moving forward, we will be looking to develop a strategic plan for the future and to really ensure that we are asking and answering the right questions, that our sampling methods are using the best technology and available science, and that we are working with the lab to really create a meaningful monitoring program that we can point to continue these efforts. I would just like to highlight that the fact that this program is non-regulatory is essential to its success. It's allowed us to have these conversations that if they had been under a regulatory hand, probably never would have happened. And so there's a lot of energy and momentum that we're really excited about. I would love to thank the team at ODA, Gilbert and Catherine, team at DEQ, David, Colin, Jean, very, very motivated, creative thinkers, and lots of good things happening for our state. So anyway, I'd like to say thank you again for having me. I think that's kind of all I have, what's kind of happening here in the Hood River Valley.
Chair, if I could, Chris and Cora, Lauren, the acting director of the Department of Agriculture, first and foremost, thank you for what you do. And ODA could not do its work without our district partners. So thank you. Secondly, I think you both accurately described and supported what Catherine and Gilbert had talked about why the education and the technical assistance is so important. My question is, could you, one or both of you, just describe that moment where you realize I need to go knock on Lauren's farm or the door and talk to him about a plan or what we're doing, what that conversation might look like, whether it's being invited to a learning session or that? Do you understand my question? It's more about what does that first interaction look like with a landowner that you want to be a part of your PSP? Either one of you.
Have you done that more directly, Chris? I know our OSU extension, we have them, they've done more of that facilitation, so I have less firsthand experience. Even though I do encounter lots of people that just walk up to me, hey, what are you doing? So there's lots of interactions like that. But in terms of outreach, I haven't done that personally, but I know it just takes that, like you said, that first interaction.
Yeah, I would say our approach has looked a bit different than knocking on a single person's door. And in fact, you know, it's a conversation that does, it needs a bit of diligence and delicacy, and knocking on a single person's door tends to maybe feel like people are being singled out. So our most successful approaches have really been coming at it again from a like, how do we benefit growers from a maybe economic standpoint and a fruit quality standpoint, and then how do we weave in to this these BMPs. When we surveyed a lot of our workshop participants, protecting the environment ranked out as a really high priority among this group. And so, you know, products being sprayed in waterway is literally money flushing down the system. So it's approaching it from the win-win-win standpoint is how we have been the most successful. Certainly sharing the data. We are fortunate in that our data really looks pretty good. There's a few exceedances with a few products, but it really is pretty limited. So it instantly kind of is like, hey, you guys are doing a pretty good job. Let's get these things planted so you don't lose soil, so you don't lose your ground. It doesn't threaten your fruit trees to erosion. Let's get it planted. We'll do it for you. Just give us the go ahead. So sorry, that's a long-winded answer to, we really, I guess, haven't been knocking on doors of a single person. It's really, we've been knocking on the doors of the fruit growers. And again, those partnerships, OSU has brilliant rapport with this group. And we've relied heavily on those partnerships, as well as for funding the operations. Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs has been integral into funding our efforts.
Thank you both. I actually didn't think you were knocking on doors. You went right where I thought you were, which is it really is about creating win-win for folks, and they will come along. Sometimes I hear, oh, you know, why would anybody want to participate in that? And it's because they view it in a lens of that regulatory approach, not the voluntary approach. And I think that's an important point. Two, for the board, Corey, you put up a slide. This is really a really good example of what collaborative work looks like. You saw all of the partners. It takes everybody. And I wish we could do more of these types of things in our agency with partners. We already do a lot, but I was pretty impressed at how many logos you had up there. So.
Thank you.
Barbara Boyer. I have several questions. I think I got distracted when it came down because I saw there on one of the slides from Catherine was about the DEQ lab. And I think there was some background noise and I got distracted and I didn't hear. Did you touch upon that in the capacity of the DEQ lab in this program?
Is there a specific part of that?
Well, I remember there's been a lot of backlog. So I'm just kind of curious where that's at. I mean, I hear that a lot at our conservation district level.
All the data is analyzed and then returned. I think Cora and the Jackson SWCD gets theirs in January. And so it's a pretty short turnaround. I think we're done sampling in October for some of them, and then data is ready 3 months later. And generally speaking, the lab can give our partners an update midway when we're halfway through of the spring data, and so you get that preliminary data. So in terms of getting the samples analyzed, there's not a backlog for us.
Thank you. And so I think it's interesting that PSP is on the reduction list, and then we get this presentation today and see the importance of it. So I think that's interesting. But my question, where am I? So is PSP's, is the PSP the agency's commitment to EPA?
Maybe I don't understand your question. Like it fulfills part of our cooperative agreement with EPA around water quality and pesticides. So it checks that box for our cooperative agreement with EPA.
Okay, so the importance, again, is what I'm trying to elevate here. And you talk about the movement of pesticides, and we're trying to prevent that. I think about what's just come down for the Willamette Basin and mercury TMDLs, and I just didn't know if there's going to be a coordinated effort. And I know it's probably not an ODA answer, but I feel like we might be missing some opportunities to do these things in tandem instead of everybody doing them in silos. So I just want to, that's just a comment. I don't need an answer on that. But think about it. And then I want to say to see the collection data, that the largest ones happened in my area, which means Yamhill probably needs to do another one. Because yeah, they're quite successful. And I have had clean water services on my property before. It is not a scary thing. I was taking over a generational farm and had not been into this part of the farm in 30 years. So they were really helpful to me. And so it's not scary having them on the farm. So thank you.
Miguel Lopez for the record. So Yamhill is the 9th district, correct? Why is it on pause?
It was a staff of one, and that staff person took another job at the city of Salem. So right now, that watershed council does not have any staff. They hope to hire staff sometime in the next few months, but it's been about a year. And at the time, the Soil and Water Conservation District was going through some changes. So their executive director was leaving, and they weren't able to pick up the program. Now that they have a new executive director, we've begun talking to them about taking over the program, and I think that will be a better fit because, again, for one person, it is a big project with all your other responsibilities, and so it seems like a good direction to go with the Soil and Water Conservation District there.
Barbara Boyer. So Miguel, just to answer, yes, we just had this conversation yesterday at the Conservation District. And we are now fully staffed for the first time in several years. So we are, we're on that trajectory to take this on, so.
Luisa Santamaria, I have a question too about one of your priorities is the outreach and education, and you mentioned to have grants, right? When is that time? I haven't heard about those. And when the people apply, how do you advertise that?
Sure. So the grants are specific to our PSP partners. So only the 8 current partners are able to apply. The grant applications went out September 15th. And because the partners need to use the water quality data for the year to determine their priorities and their education, the grants are due March 15th. And so they'll get the full year's data back. They can meet with their technical advisory committees and then plan their education before submitting their proposals.
Just continue that. How many applications you usually have? Or when did this program start? So you have a data about that.
Prior to this current biennium, we would get grants from 8 of the partners. Wasco Basin, up until this grant cycle, has never applied for grant funding. So they did all the monitoring, outreach, and education without any funding from ODA. So we would receive 8 grants from our partners, 1 from each, and then we would generally fund some other technical assistance programs. We've stopped accepting grants from outside parties, and that would be OSU Extension, OSU researchers were a big one, NCAP, was funded 1 year. And we've stopped doing that for the time being to increase funding to our 8 partners.
Thank you.
Yeah, Elin Miller, one hopefully quick question. You talked about current areas of focus of reevaluating what pesticides are included in the analysis. What's the process for that? Who all sits at the table, that sort of thing?
I'm not quite sure what happened before I came. I'm pretty sure it was Kevin Masterson, Kurt Cook, so DEQ, ODA, and the lab coming together, talking with industry partners, so retailers, OSU Extension, about what was being used and what we could work into our current lab analysis. They identified some overlapping pesticides, so pesticides that were important from DEQ standpoint, ODA standpoint, but also were being used by growers. And those were the top priority. And then there was a medium priority list and then a lower priority list. We've sent that out to our partners to review and internally. And then from there, the lab moved forward with the ones that were ranked the highest priority.
Just as a follow-up, you might think about using that advisory committee too for that, because again, I saw from looking at the data, there's been some changes in availability, I'll just say that, of certain pesticides that will then change the use of others that had not been as used as much before. And that's probably why you've seen some spikes. So.
Miguel Lopez for the record. So, in Cora's slide about Jackson, SWCD, she had highlighted a spot in red, and it was more like an urban component. Are we seeing more runoff water pesticide issues from cities more so than farmers? If we're working hard as a community to better our pesticide usage as farmers, I mean, what am I trying to say? Our town's a bigger culprit now.
Sure. Do you want me to answer from a statewide perspective, or would you like Cora to talk about what's happening more locally with her urban sites?
Statewide would be great.
There are high concentrations of pesticides coming out of the urban areas. Some of the highest concentrations and exceedances I've seen are from urban areas. And so I don't think of it as one area being like better or worse or using more or less. It's just everyone contributing a little piece of the pie. And by the time it gets to our sampling point, it really adds up. But urban homeowners and landscapers are big pesticide users, and there's a lot of impervious surface and a lot of ways to channel that water, that stormwater or irrigation water directly into the waterways. So they are a big contributor.
Okay, thank you very much for your participation today and all the nice, good information we have received.
Got one more.
You have one more question? Oh, okay. But also, I would like to ask the members that are online, they have questions. That will be the moment. Okay.
Okay. Chad Allen, I just had a question, I guess, to see if there would be an opportunity for maybe a comment from the representation from DEQ on their opinion on the voluntary program and how it's working and how that partnership is.
Good morning, Chair Santa Maria and the entire board. I was introduced earlier, but for the record, my name is David Gruen. I am DEQ's Columbia River Coordinator. I started in February of this year, and as was mentioned, I help co-manage the program, so I'm essentially Catherine's counterpart at DEQ. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak a little bit on DEQ's perspective, which is a tremendous amount of support for this program. I mean, I think DEQ would echo a lot of what we've heard from our ODA colleagues. The voluntary, locally led nature of this program, I think, is a real strength. And I think the past 20 years of this program being active, there's been some really big successes that from DEQ's perspective, I think this is a preferential to a regulatory approach. You know, I think we've seen really good work being voluntarily. We're seeing the engagement of partners and of general public, and we are having success in reducing pesticide concentrations from reaching streams. So to the extent that that can be done in a voluntary manner, I think DEQ supports those efforts. And I guess I'll keep my comments brief because I know there's a time crunch. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for the question. So I think we have some questions from the members joining us virtual. Okay, Shante Johnson, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry,
Okay.
I was trying to get off mute pretty quickly. So I was listening about Shante Johnson here. I was just listening and I heard a little bit about how a lot of homeowners, help to contribute to some of the pesticide use in urban areas. And I was just curious if there's any messaging going out to folks in urban areas around pesticide use and how to maybe not use Roundup when they're gardening or, other pesticides and things like that. And alternatives to use of some of those pesticides. So I just was curious if there's any messaging going out to folks.
This is Catherine Reifenberg for the record. Yes, there is statewide messaging going out. A few years ago, a lot of the municipalities around the state combined to form the Clean Rivers Coalition that provides specific messaging around pesticide use to urban homeowners about alternatives to pesticides and how to keep pesticides from running off into the storm drains. So they've started releasing content this year. And then depending on the amount of urban area in a basin, the area will tailor messaging accordingly. So in the Amazon area, it's almost exclusively urban. They work closely with their with the city of Eugene to create messaging around pesticide use, and they also mostly focus their education on urban landscapers and how urban landscapers can reduce pesticide use and use the correct products and products correctly in urban areas.
Thank you. I don't know, we have another question. Dean Semenich, no? I think I saw her, but I don't know, there's a question. Maybe no. This is really interesting and we can be here forever talking and asking more questions, but I think we have to finish right now. We are going in a break, but before we go to the break, I still have to remind if somebody wants to do a public comment to sign out in the table. There is a sign up sheet, and after that we're going to have a break of maybe 10 minutes because our next point in our agenda is at 10:45. So we will be back at 10:45. We're trying to be in the schedule. Sorry. Many things to do today. Thank you.
Sweet. Your seats.
Hello, we're going to continue with our meeting, please, if you can sit.
Additional.
Okay. Yeah. See you later.
Got a ton of money now.
Okay, Luisa Santa Maria for the record. We're going to continue with our meeting with the item 5 in our agenda. We're going to have an update on ODA agricultural water quality management. We're going to call Isaac and sorry, and Jennifer Wigwell, right? I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce correctly.
Michael, that's okay. It happens all the time.
Please don't forget to say your name, state your name before giving your comments.
Yeah, again, good morning, board, for the record. Isaac Stapleton, Natural Resources Program Area Director. Carla is getting up our presentation. So I'm joined with Jennifer Weigel here today. She is the Water Quality Administrator for the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, and we'll be talking today about the efforts to update the memorandum of agreement between our two agencies relating to the water quality program. We'll give a brief background on the efforts so far to update the MOA between the agencies, a revision, summary of revisions to the MOA, and then talk about the public comment that we received through the process and our responses to that comment and changes made. So next slide, Carla. So just some brief background. I believe we presented this earlier to the board this year, but the original MOA was established in 2012. It was then later renewed in 2018 without any revisions. And now we're in the process of going through more substantial updates to bring it in line with what current practices are. As a reminder, DEQ is the lead for the Federal Clean Water Act in the state. The legislature then further directed ODA to develop plans and rules to prevent and control water pollution related to agricultural activities and maintain water quality related to ag practices. And this purpose of the MOA is really to describe what the roles and responsibilities are of each agency and how we collaborate and work together in that effort. I should note that the MOA doesn't limit or alter either agency's existing authorities. It just purely describes how we engage and interact together to achieve that goal. Next slide. So this slide is just a quick rundown of the efforts over this last year. We began updating the MOA in January. Program staff as well as program management have met regularly throughout the year to make sure that we're capturing what we are currently doing in our processes accurately in the updates. We've engaged with the Environmental Quality Commission and the board liaison, Brian Harper. We met with them earlier this year as well with the program directors to talk about this and shared a draft early on with the board. And then after that, that draft was submitted for public comment for a 30-day public comment period. And since that public comment is closed, staff have been working on evaluating the comments that we received and then making any appropriate revisions to the MOA from that. And we'll discuss those a little later. Next slide. So I think the updates that have been made to the MOA since 2012 have really been to capture the changes over time and to reflect what our current practices are. Some of the key changes that are in this new draft MOA are an inclusion of a program effectiveness review and adaptive management process, more detail around what that process and the information sources are. There's the addition of a compliance and enforcement section that wasn't previously listed. I should note, though, that the compliance and enforcement process and practices for ODA haven't changed. They're just documented into the MOA now. Similarly, the SIA programs weren't listed, or that process wasn't listed in the prior MOA, and that is now spelled out to be more clear. And then additionally, it adds to the process that we use to implement TMDLs. Previously, ODA was implementing TMDLs only through area plans and rules. And now this gives us another option to implement TMDLs through TMDL implementation plans that are wider, not directly reliant on area plans and rules. For example, with the Mercury TMDL for the Willamette, where it's a much larger area and encompasses multiple area plans. And so it's more efficient and effective for program deliverance to have the wider TMDL implementation process outside of the area plans and rules that would then inform those plans. There's a couple things that really haven't changed in the MOA, and that's the process around reviewing plans and rules and the inputs from the local advisory committees. So that is still reflective in there. Next slide. Both agencies acknowledge and are committed to meeting water quality goals, addressing resource and information gaps to those goals, to the adaptive management process, as well as keeping the board and the EQC informed as we go forward. And that is captured in the MOA as well. Next slide. This slide is a snapshot of the flowchart that is included with the draft MOA, and I should have noted at the beginning that you should have a full draft in your board packets, a staff report, and then a full summary of the public comments that we received. So those are there for reference, and this flowchart is in there as well. This section is just highlighting the adaptive management process related to TMDLs, the importance of monitoring and collecting data, reviewing, evaluating that data, and then necessary adjustments as appropriate. I think it's important to call out that that sources, sorry, let me move here, that teasing out the various contributions and improvements from any specific source or source sector when we're talking about TMDLs is difficult. And so relying on an adaptive management process to evaluate the information that we have and make adjustments is critical. So with that next slide, I think I will pass it off to Jennifer to talk about the public comment that we received and responses to those.
Thank you, Isaac. Again, my name is Jennifer Weigel. I'm with DEQ and I'm the water quality administrator there. So in terms of this, the public input we received, we did receive quite a bit of public input during our comment period that we held during the month of September. As Isaac said, you do have a full and complete summary of all the input that we received, but just in summary, we received input from almost 300 commenters. Many of those were a kind of a form letter format from various individuals. So among those almost 300 individual commenters, there were about 12 different unique comment letters that we received. A number of them did request changes to the MOA, and I'll talk about in just a moment precisely what we did with those requests for change. As you might anticipate, we took some and didn't take others, so I'll talk about that in just a moment. There were additional kinds of comments that we received that didn't necessitate any particular change. Let's see, just in terms of kind of broad themes that we heard in those comments, there were a lot of things that that people asked about that were related to the agency's authority and whether or not that authority was accurately captured, or whether, or some people wanted other things added, people wanted things subtracted, some people thought DEQ should take on more, some people thought DEQ was taking on too much, and likewise for ODA. So there was, as you might expect, some of those types of comments that we received in terms of themes. Others were more of a clarifying nature and pointing out better ways to either through their confusion in terms of what they commented on, we're like, oh, we could say that better, and we made those changes accordingly. So it kind of spanned the whole spectrum in terms of different types of input that we received amongst these various commenters. Next slide, please. So specifically in terms of revisions that we made in response to those comments that we received, so we clarified a number of things. So there were comments that really focused in on some folks thought that non-point sources were purely voluntary, and other folks thought we didn't include enough about voluntary. So we made clarifications to acknowledge that the agriculture non-point source program has both regulatory and voluntary components. So we went through the MOA and made sure that that language was clear about that. There was some individuals who commented who thought that maybe this MOA was only about that was potentially limiting or going beyond authorities. So we went through, and in those cases, we made further revisions to clarify and tie more closely, ensure that the language that we did have in the MOA was closely tied to existing statute and regulation, so that that aspect was clear, and then explained as appropriate in the responses to comment about how we made those changes. And also, we received some comments around the enforcement section that we added that it wasn't entirely clear to some folks exactly how the jurisdiction played out between DEQ and ODA. And as Isaac said, that section is intended to capture current practice and current authorities. And through some of those comments, we realized that we could be more clear about when ODA was the lead, and in those instances, how things played out where the agencies do have some joint jurisdiction, or there's an aspect of an issue where there is some aspects might be ODA jurisdiction and some aspects might be DEQ. And in those instances, we work together to cover those circumstances. So those are just a number of pieces of things that we changed in response to input that we got. Next slide, please. So there was another kind of set of comments that we received that that we did not make revisions to, and some of those, of course, for those that expressed support for the efforts between the agencies, those didn't. We appreciated hearing that, but of course that didn't necessitate any particular changes. We received some comments that were outside the scope of the MOA. So again, this scope of the MOA is really focused on the implementation of the water quality programs between the two agencies. And in the very beginning of the MOA, we acknowledge that there are some other agreements that also have a relationship to water quality but are addressed separately, such as the MOA that we have around the CAFO program, the PSP program that you just heard about this morning. We have other agreements. So in some cases, there were folks who commented on topics that aren't explicitly within the scope of this. And so we explained why those were not addressed here. Other folks commented about the roles of soil and water conservation districts and agriculture area local advisory committees. And again, those are, that process exists, that's ongoing within ODA. This is really about how ODA and its staff and management work with DEQ staff and management. Not to say that those aren't important, but we are not addressing that level of coordination that ODA does with those entities and its own processes within this MOA. And then there were some folks noted air quality regulation. Again, this is a water quality based MOA, so we did not make those. And then there were some folks who requested a lot more detail about the work that we were doing. And again, with this being MOA, we wanted to keep this at a higher level about how our programs interact and not get into all of the specific if-then details of a lot of the details in our programs themselves. And so with that, if I could have the next slide, please. And so where we are with that, excuse me. So this week, we're here in front of you to summarize where we're at with this process. On Friday morning, we'll be talking to the Environmental Quality Commission and doing a similar overview of the process and where we're at. Our goal is to have both of the acting director and the interim director for our respective agencies sign the MOA by the end of this calendar year. A lot of these conversations and the process that Isaac laid out that we initiated early this year, we see a lot of great infrastructure that's been built in terms of the coordination between the agencies, and there's a longstanding relationship that we have with our staff and managers that we expect to continue. The conversations we've had, I think, lay really great groundwork for this ongoing work between the agencies, and some of the work described in this MOA is already occurring, as Isaac talked about, with the work, for example, in the Willamette Basin or with the Mercury TMDL. So we expect that to continue beyond once this MOA is signed and we move into a more focused implementation. So next slide. And with that, I think we will welcome any questions or additional discussion you may want to ask of us.
Barbara Boyer. Because soil and water conservation districts were specifically called out in this, the commission did review this pretty intensely, the Soil and Water Conservation Commission, and we did not provide comment, but the Oregon Association of Conservation Districts did. But so I just wanted you to know that I've been pretty intimate with this document. How long is this? I don't see an end date. Like, how often is it reviewed? Or I'm not seeing any of that in here.
Thank you, Barbara, for the question. I believe the MOA calls out for a 7-year review period. It should be, I think, towards the beginning of the document, if I'm recalling correctly, but it was previously 5. We have lots of MOAs with DEQ and others that are on that same cycle. And so instead of having them all land on that same 5-year cycle and doing that work at the same time, we moved to have this one be slightly off that to help with workload and capacity.
Thank you. And then just a quick comment. Anytime you open yourself up to public comment, you know, it can be a little uncomfortable. So thank you very much for allowing that. It is the first time you guys have allowed that with this document. So I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think we need to, because of the time, we need to continue with our next item in our agenda. And I think you have more questions. Maybe later you can ask. They will be around. Okay, so the next item in our agenda is the public comment. Do we have anyone who has signed up to provide public comment online? Online? Only two. Oh, both are online. Okay, so I think I'm going to call the first one. Thomas Booth is here online, right?
I don't see that he's joined. Are we early?
No, I think we're perfect on time. I suppose it was at 11 o'clock. The next one will be Tiffany Monroe. Okay, I think she's there. Okay, please go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Luisa Santamaria, Board of Ag members and ODA. My name is Tiffany Monroe, Associate Director of Oregonians for Food and Shelter. Today, I will be commenting on the PSP, MOA, and climate resolution. Our industry greatly appreciates the historical successes of the Pesticide Stewardship Partnership, a voluntary, non-regulatory program designed to help producers improve stewardship practices, resulting in fewer pesticide detections in local water bodies. This is a unique program designed to monitor in specific locations and timings, with targeted data feeding into outreach and education for a variety of pesticide user groups. Over the last few years, changes in the program have jeopardized producer trust, including the increased focus on pesticide monitoring data in of itself, with a significant decrease in education and outreach activities on which the program depends. DEQ recently launched a public data tool with the PSP data, despite serious concerns raised by many members of the PSP Stakeholder Advisory Committee. DEQ has promoted this tool to the public as a resource that can tell you where it is safe to swim and fish. However, the PSP monitoring program was never designed as a watershed scale monitoring program, and the data is not generalizable in that way. This data is being misrepresented to the public in a way that will have serious policy implications, and this was our initial concern for the data tool. We have called for a more accurate disclaimer about what the PSP data can tell us and what it can't, and also for a methods tab to be added to the data tool with all the usual information from the PSP biennial report. We have yet to see these changes be made. We want to stress how critical it is that the PSP data be conveyed to the public in a way that is scientifically accurate and in a proper context with how and why this data is gathered in the first place. Our primary concern is protecting the success of this program that is based in volunteerism and trust, and ensuring that when agencies present information on pesticides to the public, it is done so with attention to accuracy and detail. Based on our concerns as a whole, the PSP program needs a hard reset to maintain trust, relevance, and success among pesticide applicator groups, industry, and the public. Thank you, Isaac and Jennifer, for your comments regarding the MOA earlier. We also wanted to flag to the board that the Coalition of Natural Resource Organizations submitted comments on the MOA between ODA and DEQ. Our concerns are primarily regarding the statutory authority between the two agencies, which was noted earlier, and ensuring that the roles have clear boundaries. A few of our specific comments include, the document appears in many areas to adopt the precautionary principle. If that is the intention, more stakeholder engagement is required before that is adopted into agency policy. 2, broadly, there is a lack of clarity around how the agency is developing implementation plans for TMDLs within the Agricultural Water Quality Program. The agency needs to clarify the intent to continue to use local area plans as an implementation vehicle for TMDLs. Third, we have concern with allowing DEQ to participate in field observation and participate in study design and monitoring. SIAs are a core ODA function, and landowners may lose trust if DEQ's role is expanded. 4, in Section 4, the language suggests that DEQ has jurisdiction over agricultural water quality. This is not how the program functions now, nor has it been as the program is under ODA jurisdiction. We hope that our comments make it into the final review, which was mentioned by Isaac and Jennifer earlier. We look forward to reviewing that. I will wrap up with comments regarding Climate Resolution 319. We appreciate the board's work on the climate change resolution. We would like to request that the resolution incorporate language about the need for increased productivity and increased production efficiencies, including integrated approaches and technologies designed to help people manage agricultural systems and respond and adapt to climate change. These integrated approaches include, but are not limited to, innovations in pesticide management tools, precision agriculture, nutrient management, and conservation. Thank you so much for the opportunity to comment, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to call the other person again. Thomas Bus is here. It's not. So, okay, I think those were the only people that signed up for a public comment. So we're going to close this public comment now, and then we are going to follow with our agenda, and then we have our item 7, that is OSU Extension Service and Engagement Programs. Dr. Ivor Lyles, Vice Provost for Extension Service and Engagement, Director of Oregon State University Extension. Please join us. Thank you. Do you mind to use the microphone? Thank you.
Good morning. Let me start by saying that this is my first time meeting with you, so I'm not completely up to speed on your protocol. So if I step out of bounds, please feel free to direct me in a path that I should go, and I'm confident that will happen based on my previous working relationships with a couple of the guys in the room with ODA. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here today and to talk about extension and the work that we're doing across this state. Many of you probably know that I've just started my second year. Technically, I'm 14 months in. I've made the complete cycle and the complete circle around the entire state. I've been in every extension county, every county, and in every extension office, and I met with stakeholder groups, county commissioners in all 36 of Oregon counties. It's a diverse, unique state, and it is a beautiful state and one that is extremely productive in agriculture. We take great pride in Extension as far as being a part of the educational process to help promote and increase agriculture productivity in this state. And I look forward to continuing being a part of that ongoing partnership. I have about 6 or 7 slides, not many. I'm sure you guys are probably tired of the slides that I would like to walk through as a result of the presentation today, and then open up and answer any questions that you might have for the next few minutes that would be remaining. For the upcoming legislative session and the work that we're going to be doing this next year, we've settled on building a more resilient Oregon. And this is in partnership with our College of Agriculture and College of Forestry at OSU. We can't do the work that we're doing without the research base that they provide to make sure that all of the information that we disseminate through our extension offices are scientific in nature. Sometimes we get criticized for that, but I think it's critically important that we make recommendations that our farmers can really rely upon in a very meaningful way. And so this year, we are proposing to our legislative body for the 2023 funding of extension that we think about enhancing a resilient food system through the College of Agriculture, a resilient communities through extension, because truly what we do is build communities, build families, and build an economic base in our urban and rural communities. And we also look at how do we build a resilient natural resource working with the College of Forestry. Next slide, please. One of the things that we're extremely proud and yet have some work to do. So when we say we're proud and have some work to do, and that is, as many of you know, that Oregon has 36 counties. We are in 35 of those counties. Federal law requires that Extension develop a partnership between the USDA, state legislators, and county government. Upon arriving here, I've discovered that many of you probably were already aware that 35 of those counties, we have an extremely strong partnership with them. They value the work that we do, so much so that 26 has passed a tax service district to support that work. Others are quite generous in the support that they provide for extension because they see a real need in the quality of educational programs that we deliver. But we do have one here in the urban areas who have decided that agriculture is not a high priority for them, and they do not fund extension. Therefore, we do not put any of our federal or state dollars into Multnomah County. We do work there in grant areas because there's a lot of low income need and programs that we think are beneficial to the county. And we will be working over the next year or so to enhance that working relationship so they see a greater need for the quality of educational programs that we offer. Next slide, please. At its core, extension work in 4 broad areas, all of which are so critically important to this state and enhancing the overall viability of it. We're really concerned about healthy communities and economics because truly without an economic base in some of our rural counties particular, families cannot thrive and do the type things they need to be successful. A resilient and productive forestry and natural resource is critically important. As I don't have to tell you, I moved here from Nevada, and the mountains of Nevada is beautiful, but it doesn't compare to the diversity of forestry and rivers and the ability to be outdoors and do all the great things that we have to offer, whether it's from the sea or the mountains over in Eastern Oregon. So the natural resource and protecting that through strong educational programs in partnership with other agencies and organizations is so critically important to the work that we do. is a resilient agriculture food system in this state. We grow over 230 different crops in this state. And when you do the added value, you can only imagine the economic input and impact of agriculture for the state of Oregon. And I think about all of the work when I first drove to Eastern Oregon and topped the mountain and looked out across and saw the wheat fields and began to think about the amount of wheat that we grow here and then the amount of wheat that we ship to other parts of the world, in particular Asia. We have a tremendous impact in feeding the world right out of our great state here in Oregon. So we're very proud of that. But to continue to do that, we need to provide farmers with the education information that they need to be successful. And the last, and maybe the most important from my perspective, now that I'm a grandfather, is the work that we do around Thriving Youth. Our young people, in particular, through our Strong 4-H program, our outdoor school educational program, we impact lives that will impact Oregon for the next 2, 3, and 4 generations, depending on their life expectancy. So it's so critically important that we give them the type foundation they need to be successful. And I'm pleased to say that as we evaluate our youth effective programs here, I think we're doing that. And if not, we will continue to try to modify and change so that we are. Next slide, please. This slide truly represent the fact that we operate in 6 regions throughout the state, and we have 6 regional directors that provide the day-to-day supervision of those regions as we go forward. Our programs are, for those who may not be aware, but I'm confident that everyone sitting around this table, at least I would hope that they are aware of the programs that we offer. Our 4-H youth development, agriculture and natural resource, family and community health, forestry and natural resources, OSU Open Campus, our Sea Grant program, and outdoor school. I'd like to call out the outdoor school in that it is not funded by our state dollars that come from the legislature to support extension. It is a separate funding line item that comes from the state lottery funds to support specific outdoor school. And it is mandated in that law that it be administered because of the quality of work that had been done by Extension. So the director of Extension must serve as the director or the administrator for outdoor school. Next slide, please. Spend a few minutes now talking about budgets because in many of our cases, we partner, I don't know if partner is the right word. We work in collaboration with the Oregon Department of Ag to make sure that there are key programs that educational activities need to take place across this state, and we're more than pleased to do that. One of my first positive observations here was with the Department of Ag as we worked on some of the educational outreach programs that needed to happen this past year, and I'm so thankful we were able to do that, working with our regional director, Wiley Thompson, and others, and Sam and Gima, our ag program leader, to make sure that happened. But we can't continue without the support of our legislature for this upcoming year. We will be asking our state legislature for approximately $50 million increase to support the 3 statewide entities. It is divided into 2 major categories. The first will be our continuous service level, which is just keeping the lights on, paying the bill for the 3 of us, which is Extension, the Agriculture Experiment Station, and the Forest Resource Center. And so that is approximately $16 million, which I think I looked at the numbers this morning. Technically, it's $15.7 million to do that, to keep up with all the things we need to do. The second part will be the 32 plus to enhance new programs that I mentioned to you. Those new programs will focus on resilient food systems, including a lot of production work around the Sea Grant and the work that we're doing there to enhance that production. Resilient communities, and I purposefully broke resilient communities out in 2 categories. We're saying resilient rural communities because we want to see what's happening in our rural areas, and we want our rural commissioners to see the work that we're doing there. But it's just as critically important that we show what we're doing in the urban areas of Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas County. So the budget will be divided so that the legislature can look at it and say, yes, here's what's going on in the urban areas, and here's what's going on in the rural. I hope they do not take that in a negative to say, well, I'm going to fund one area and not fund the other. And so hopefully we have not made a strategic decision that would be negative in any shape, form, or fashion. Next slide, please. Actually, you can go on to the next one, I think. Been talking about that one. I thought you might have an interest in knowing how we spend our dollars because so many of our dollars go to support programs. Let me rephrase that. All of our dollars go to support programs, and we leverage those to bring in additional dollars as well. So the largest portion of our funding comes from the state. The state funds us at the tune of about approximately $38 million on a biannual for extension work. The university, which is a very small part of what we do, as represented in the orange on there, if you can see the colors, is only about 1% of funding that we get from student fees. Is $763,000 to be exact. And I'd like to call your attention to the investment that counties make. Counties contribute currently about $15 million or 21% of our budget on an annual basis. So they all but one, they see value in the work that we do and how we support county programs. Our federal government contributes about approximately $5 million, or about 6% of our budget on an annual basis. Again, I said the state government is the largest at 42%, and then we generate through gifts about 4%, program fees 2%, and the grants and contracts that we bring in another 18 million. So we leverage those dollars that come from the state in a very productive way to support our overall program effort here. Next slide. Let me close by again saying if there's things that you would like to know specifics on as we move into our upcoming legislative session, or if there's things, I know you guys are a state agency or a state agency board, and you're limited in what you do, but you're also producers, community organizers, and others to help tell the story of the work that's going on and what we're asking for. And so I will close with the final two slides. So the next slide, please. Continuous service level is our most pressing priority, which is slightly less than 16 million. But I think this is the year to look at how do we enhance our productivity in agriculture, the communities, and our natural resource. And when I look at the overall picture for the state from a financial standpoint and look at the quality of work that we are currently engaged in, a $32 million investment in agriculture and natural resource is quite reasonable. We're developing a final brochure that we will be circulating throughout the state so all of our groups will know exactly what we're asking for. Next slide, please. And we have a representative graphic to show how they overlap, because we can't have a productive ag system without strong communities, and we can't have strong communities without a strong natural resource, because they're all interconnected. And I look forward to conversing with you and answering any question that you might have about extension and the work that we're engaged in. We bought two brochures that we will leave. One is on our overall program, just a brief brochure on that, and one is on our focus on agriculture and the work that we do to support agriculture. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Stacy, have anything? Do we have question from Rachel? Stacy? Okay, please, Stacy.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Dr. Lyles for being here today with us and to say that I greatly appreciate the collaboration and strong relationship we have between OSU's College of Agricultural Sciences and with OSU Extension. So thank you, Dr. Lyles.
Thank you, Stacy.
Miguel Lopez for the record. Dr. Lyles, why is Multnomah County not participating?
I can't answer that because I'm not a commissioner from Multnomah County, but I tried to go back and look, and the official records show that they participated. I may have it slightly off on here, but it was like 2004, 2005. And so up until that point, they were participating, and for some reason, they voted to discontinue the support. I assume it was because they didn't feel that they were getting value from what Extension was offering. It could have been that we were not telling an effective story at the time. And so we recalibrated since I arrived, and I look forward to trying to turn that around.
Elin Miller for the record. Thank you for your presentation. And I may have misunderstood you up front. Was it 5.0 or 1.5 increase in funding when you were talking about the budget overview, or are you talking about the current budget?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
15 or 50? 50.
From the state,
Mm-hmm.
we get approximately, it's a little less, it's 45 from the state, if I'm thinking, if I'm correct. But are you talking about the increase is 50, what we're asking for?
You're asking for 50 million more dollars.
More dollars.
And 16 going to the base and
Continuous service level, then the balance is approximately 32.3 or 32.4. So let me just speak in round terms. We're asking for 16 million for continuous service level. That is what the three of us need to keep our lights on, to give the raises, to pay insurance and do all those things. And then 32 million would go to enhance new programs in those three areas I talked about, which would be resilient food systems, resilient communities, and resilient natural resource.
Yeah. And just as a follow-up question, so that would be a overall percentage increase off of current funding would be what? And then secondly, are there other OSU, and this may be more for the dean, other competing OSU budget requests? Because I've heard of some that we're very interested, that some of us in the wine industry are very interested in. So anyway.
I actually did not do the math on the percent budget increase. So if Stacy can do the math right quick and let us know that our overall budget now is about 168 million. Okay. But she'd have to get the exact number for me. Now, we are, all three of us, is why we're referred to as a statewide, we are a line item in the state budget. And so we get permission. We keep our administrators informed of what we're asking for. Once our budget is approved, it becomes a line item, and it is ours to manage and operate. And so we submit it through HEC, the Higher Ed Coordinating Committee, and all of those things. There will be tremendous requests coming from OSU from other areas, but it is at the same level of competition as if it was coming from the University of Oregon or anyone else. So we both have our individual and separate line items within the state budget.
Okay, thank you.
Barbara Boyer. I've got a couple of things. Thank you for your presentation. I sit on our local advisory service group, and I had no idea about the outdoor school. So thank you for that. I flagged that in my brain. But I have a question on that. So is that distributed directly to OSU, or is it funneled through parks? And
No, it is distributed directly to OSU and for the extension service to manage. But approximately by law, 85% of those funds are pass-through funds that go to local school districts all across the state. We can only keep 15% for administrative operations.
And what is that budget? Do you know that number?
Approximately 30 million.
Okay.
But it increases and decreases as our great citizens buy lottery tickets.
Thank you. What was my other comment? Oh, so I pulled this up. So are you aware with NRCS getting that urban agricultural grant and Multnomah County is one of them?
I was not aware.
Okay, I just pulled it up.
So
It's called Urban Producers, Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production. And Multnomah County was, through NRCS, was granted. It's quite, I don't have the figure off the top of my head, but just flag that for yourself and maybe.
Yes, we need to talk.
Maybe there could be a, some sort of collaboration.
Yes,
so
I totally agree.
All right, thank you. One last question, sorry. Small farm agents, how many are there in the state?
There's approximately 8 because most small farm agents serve more than one county. There's at least 2 vacancies at the current time. It is a couple of the positions in the budget request to be filled if we get what we're asking for.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question.
Sure.
Okay. Chad Allen. So Oregon previously had two dairy extension agents and one is retired out of Tillamook. Do you know whether you're going to be budgeting for another dairy extension agent in Oregon?
Yes, that I can answer. What we have done, I am all 3 of my degrees is in agriculture. So sometimes I'm accused by some of our areas of being too pro-ag because we have such a broad portfolio. The 4-H people want this. We've given Sam and Gima the authority to go ahead out of our existing budget to fill, since we were down to that was the last dairy position that we had, to fill the dairy position back in Tillamook County.
Okay. Well, that's great. Thank you.
So even if we do not get this, we will be filling the dairy position.
Okay, I think we have a question from Stacy.
Yes, to answer the question on the base funding, the number reflects an 8.67% increase in operating expenses plus a $2.2 million catch-up to restore a deficit from our 21-23 allocation, which wasn't continuing service level. So it's about 8.67% plus 2.2 million catch-up for that 15.7 million. So I think that clarifies that question, and that's outside of the Resilient Oregon package. The only other comment was, I guess, adding to the comments about small farm agents across the state. They not only serve small farms, they serve all farms that come to them and ask for help.
We have time for more questions.
Yeah, we've got a little more time. Lauren Henderson, I'm acting director. Dr. Lyles, thank you for coming today. I've had the pleasure of meeting a couple of times, one at OSU and one at ODA. And I wanted to mention to this group that we have made a commitment to put our executive team at ODA alongside the executive team at OSU to have more discussions and carry forward. I think that's important. We used to do that many years ago, and they were productive conversations just collectively, you know, and now that I know what my competition looks like for general fund, that helps me have those discussions. Now, I'm just joking, Dr. Lyles. One of the questions that I get frequently, and I'm embarrassed to say I can't honestly answer it very, very well, is if you don't mind, you and Stacy just talking about how you work together and include forestry in that, just maybe internally at OSU, and how you talk about, I mean, the budget. I think it's great that you guys have come together on a budget and can talk about that, but I get that asked a lot. I think there's a lot of confusion maybe about what is Dr. Lyle's group doing, what's Stacy's group doing, and et cetera. If you, real simply, and it's probably not a simple question, but.
Thank you. I think that's an excellent question because we are structured different than many land grant universities across this nation. Let me start though by talking about our joint meeting. We are already communicating around what that date looked like for this spring. So hopefully our staff, my staff has contacted yours to say, will this date work? I'm so excited about that. The second part of that, aquaculture was not on my radar until we had that meeting. And so I've gone back and looked at, should I build in at least one faculty member to address inland water type, fish type production. And so these meetings do lead to productive ends. My responsibility is extension, which means it is strictly the delivery of outreach to reach in every county, every community. We can and should be doing applied research. Old the terminology used to be demonstration type research. It's not fully defined from a USDA standpoint of what is applied or demonstration type research. So sometimes we stretch the limits on that. But I like to say that I can't go beyond, what's going on now. So without Stacy and Tom or the College of Ag and the College of Forestry, I would not have a foundation to develop educational programs to deliver. We would quickly run out of new knowledge or new information. Therefore, it's so critically important that the College of Ag is constantly, number one, preparing new students for us to hire in extension or in all of the workforce we need in this state. But just as important that they're doing the basic research around new varieties, new production techniques, and all of those things, so that the faculty within extension then can take that and develop an educational program or put it in layman's terms so that we can deliver it at a level that is acceptable. Now that's not to say we don't have joint appointed or one person doing the research and doing the others, but because of our budget being agency or specific, we can keep track of whether that person is 60% research or 30% extension and all of those nuances that you as a citizenry or a farmer or a homemaker should not be concerned with. But we are accountable for our own funding. I tried to put it in layman's terms. Stacy, you might want to add a more refined definition than that.
I would just say that they're separate organizations, but I don't think that the ag industry should feel that, right? The College of Ag Sciences has about 1,000 employees statewide, and about 30% of those employees have full or partial extension appointments. So it's imperative that Ivory and I work closely together, also with Tom DeLuca, the Dean of the College of Forestry, so that the whole system is working as efficiently as possible and folks around our great state are getting their needs met from us. So they are separate organizations, but we work hard to have them work seamlessly together.
Barbara Boyer. So I notice on your finance, the budgeting pie chart, 2% is program fees. Can you give me an example of what program fees are at extension level?
Yes, one that you may not suspect is would be 4-H. We have a $4 fee for each member that is a 4-H'er in the state. But because, again, we have such relationship with our county 4-H volunteers, parents, and others. Many counties have volunteer leaders association, as you're probably aware. Even though we have the fee, they do not charge the kid. They pay it out of dollars they raise or do other things with. So that is one example. Another one could be if we're offering a workshop and there's a $10 registration fee. Typically, we set the fee based on what the food costs and other things. But if there's dollars left over, we do not refund those dollars to the participant.
I think you don't have more questions, and thank you.
Thank you again. I appreciate the relationship and the partnership and I'm looking forward to us coming up with even greater ideas. And I'm hopeful that both of us get what we need from general fund in this upcoming cycle.
Yeah. All right. So I think we're finished our meetings in this morning. You have something?
Yeah, I
else?
just have something quickly, just for process order with public comment. We did receive 2 written public comments too that I like to actually make aware. There are 2 written ones. We don't have to talk about them, but I always like to at least identify that we did receive one from Linda Duman and then Megan Kemple. I just think for the record, it's nice to have that.
Are you going to read it? No,
we don't need to read them. I just think just identify that we received them.
All right. Well, okay. So what we have to, yeah. Okay, so I think we're gonna have a lunch break. But before we leave, wanna mention about the tour this afternoon. We're scheduled for an off-site tour this afternoon, and we are planning to meet in the lobby. We are going to departure 1 p.m. We are planning to carpool to the location that is the North Willamette Research and Extension Center, the place where I work. And I have several colleagues that are ready waiting to